Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the Wednesday, January 15th meeting of the Reno City Planning Commission. First item on our agenda, I will ask everybody to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will actually ask Angela Foos to lead us this evening. Thank you. Michelle, can we have roll call, please?
Here. There. Kathleen Taylor. Okay. Peter Gower.
Here.
Ed Hawkins.
Here.
John Marshall.
Here.
Paula Levis.
Here.
Alex Felto is absent. Mark Johnson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. I do have several requests to speak forms for the actual public hearing. Is there, Michelle, we don't have any for this item?
No, we do not.
Anyone wishing to make general public comment? Okay, I will close that and bring it back to the agenda for item 4, approval of the minutes from the Reno City Planning Commission meeting of December 18th, 2019.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Gower, move to approve.
Thank you. I have a motion to approve.
Mr. Hawkins, second.
I have motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. And with that, we will move on to item 5, a presentation by the Washoe County Health Department on air quality regulations and management. Daniel, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. For the record, Daniel Inoue with the Washoe County Health District Air Quality Management Division. Appreciate the invite, and we always enjoyed talking about health district goals with the Planning Commission. So to give you some background, the Environmental Protection Agency establishes health-based air quality standards for pollutants, including ozone. The standard for ozone is 70 parts per billion, and we're currently, with our latest certified data, at 71 parts per billion. So we're at 101% of the air quality standard. This is to show you that ozone is a summertime pollutant. We have peaks in June, July, and August, and that ties in with activities such as vehicle miles traveled and temperatures, as well as high solar radiation. So here's the trend since 2006. You can see that this curve is a real classic curve. You can tie that in with the economy. You remember that we had some pretty active times in 2006, 7, 8, and then the recession hit. So not only did the economic activity go down, but because of that, industry slowed down, vehicle miles traveled slowed down, and we did see an improvement in air pollution levels. Tough way to get there, but you can see the connection with that. And since 2011, you can see the relationship with the recovery from the recession. So not only has the air pollution levels tied in with the economy, but also you can see that the Environmental Protection Agency had strengthened the standard 3 times over that period. So again, how did we get to where we are now? EPA strengthened the ozone standard in 1997, 2008, and 2015. We saw the economic recovery and growth since 2011, and that ties in with employment, population, VMT, and a result of that is higher ozone concentration. In 2016, the health district joined EPA's Ozone Advance program, and that is a program that encourages voluntary strategies to prevent from violating the ozone standard. In 2016, the Reno City Council adopted a resolution supporting Ozone Advance, and also your commission made air quality and sustainability a priority since 2016. So ozone is a secondary pollutant. It is a combination of nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, and sunlight. The largest sources of NOx and VOC is transportation, basically the on-road and off-road sectors. On-road mobile, you can summarize that as that's cars and trucks. Off-road mobile is transportation related. It can be aircraft, it could be locomotive, and also off-road construction equipment as well. So going back to Ozone Advance, we have 5 goals related to that. One is to reduce impacts from the largest source of ozone precursors, and that's on-road motor vehicles. And we could do that by reducing trips, reducing VMT, reducing tailpipe emissions, and the true environmental impacts are the emissions and not the congestion-related level of service measurements. Our second goal is to reduce impacts from the second largest category, and that would be from the off-road sector. Another goal is to reduce impacts from the urban heat island. The urban heat island ties in with ozone because ozone is related to the temperature. So when we have warmer temperatures in our community, it accelerates the ozone formation. And also there's another feedback loop related to that. When we have warmer temperatures, we have more energy related to cooling, comfort cooling of cars and buildings, which leads to more power generation and can lead to more ozone formation as well. Another goal is to increase the efficiency of buildings. And the last goal, which we are doing tonight, is to educate and empower champions like the Planning Commission to make good decisions for a healthy community. So the health district's approach to meet the ozone standard is to incorporate ozone advance goals into plans, all the way from the regional plan to the city's master plan, and even plans such as the urban forestry management plan, all have ties to improving air quality. We look for top-down support from the different jurisdictions, and also the goals target technology such as zero-emission vehicles, behavior such as choosing to carpool or to take transit, and the built environment, which probably has the biggest impact on vehicle miles traveled and ozone formation as well. So going to the top-down support, we have adopted resolutions by all the local jurisdictions you see there. The jurisdictions cover all of Reno and Sparks with a big emphasis on the urban areas. So Reno's resolution of support, which was adopted in April of 2016, here's a summary of what the resolution contains. So it's to encourage plans and policies and codes that minimize motor vehicle trips and VMT and things related to transportation sector. So not only does it apply to city operations, but also applies to land development decisions that you are part of as well. And in 2019, these were the priorities set by the Planning Commission here. Air quality, again, has been a priority since 2016. So since 2018, the Health District has been submitting agency comments on development proposals. There are several categories that we talk about. One is transportation. Again, transportation, whether it's on-road, off-road, is the largest source of ozone precursors in Washoe County. We encourage, again, Ozone Advance is a voluntary program, so we encourage the city and Planning Commission to incorporate these voluntary strategies. So again, the built environment, especially land use pattern and form, is the largest connection to our vehicle miles traveled in our community. So we comment on energy efficiency of buildings. For our comments, we include stretch goals like having new construction be LEED or Energy Star certified. And also having things in new construction being prepped and ready to go for opportunities such as generation and even electric vehicle charging. We comment on schools. We really emphasize a central location. When we have a central location, students have more of an opportunity to walk and bike to school, thereby taking cars off the road. A central location also can reduce the number of bus routes that the school district needs to provide, which goes toward the bottom line as well. We encourage safe routes to school infrastructure around schools, whether it's new construction or any opportunity that comes across the Planning Commission or even through the city process. If we are encouraging students to walk and to bike to work or to school. School can be work. We encourage areas or infrastructure within 1 to 2 miles around there to really be inviting and safe as well, such as if we are encouraging the students to walk to school, we should have wider sidewalks than the minimums that are required. If we are encouraging the students to bike, we should have things like a multi-use path to give them the opportunity to do that. And when they do that in grade school, they'll carry that on to middle school, into high school, college, and at some point there'll be champions like you sitting on the Planning Commission to make decisions for our future. We talked about urban heat island, cool roofs. I know that that's going to be part of the Title 18 update. There are 2 categories. One would be the low slope roofs, or basically the flat roofs, and also a high slope roof, which would be more toward the residential side. On the commercial side, just having a white or light colored roof can reduce the heat island effect, basically reflecting the energy away instead of absorbing it and contributing to the heat island. And then on the residential side, it can be as simple as just a lighter shade of roof color, or just a lighter palette as well. And I mentioned the feedback loop about how the urban heat island contributes to additional energy for comfort cooling for our buildings and for our automobiles. And then we talk about construction impacts. The old diesel engines last a long time, and the old diesel engines are very, very high polluting. So we encourage projects, especially public works projects, to specify the equipment to be newer, cleaner types of construction equipment. And then we have some ministerial requirements for dust control and possible permits related to the Air Quality Management Division if it has a certain amount of emissions related to that. So what can the Planning Commission do? First, they can recognize that there are environmental, public health, and economic impacts of not meeting the ozone standard. Oops. And managing air quality is different than managing water supply. For water supply, you can import, or you can export, or you can treat water. With air, once it's out of the tailpipe or once it's in the air, we're stuck with it. Becomes our problem, and we need to find solutions locally that are different from importing or exporting clean air. And then what you can also do is to encourage better than business as usual practices. And because these are voluntary, that could lead to encouraging changes in ordinance codes and policies that support plans such as Ozone Advance. For instance, Smart Trips to Work program or employee trip reduction programs can apply to all businesses. The RTC just rebranded and redeveloped their Smart Trips program. They have it all the way down to a small number of employees. And those requirements for the small businesses are more just to provide information to the employees to know that these transportation options are available. And just getting that information to the public and to the employees makes a big difference, or a first start to helping us toward a healthy community. EV charging multifamily, or EV charging ready multifamily construction, that is a gap that is continuing out there. If you are an apartment or you're a renter and you don't have charging at home, you're going to be less likely to purchase an electric vehicle. We talk about tree canopy, or you can talk about tree canopy in some of your discussions. Those contribute to the urban heat island as well. And this is another opportunity where landscape architects could be part of the discussion to help with the overall quality of the project. And we can look at walkability indexes or indices to determine, hey, do these changes or do these things make improvements related to walkability in our community? A big step that the community took recently was the regional plan update that relates to the different tiers within our community. So if you look at this map, basically the farther away you are from the core, the fewer transportation options you have. For instance, if you are out in Mogul or Verdi, you're pretty much locked into using a car, whether you're driving or carpooling or other means, but you're going to be in a car. Where when you're in the urban core, you have many more transportation options. So transportation options is a key to improving air quality. So the further out that we have development, the more vehicle mile traveled we will generate, which ties into the environmental, public health, and economic impacts that we mentioned earlier. So what does long-term non-attainment mean in the future? On the environmental health side, it means we have poor air quality. On the public health side, if that's what you're interested in, we're going to see higher rates of chronic diseases, asthma, COPD, diabetes, and also we're going to see more lost work days. On the economic health side, once we become designated as non-attainment, then that really starts the clock for EPA as far as what we have to do. If we're designated non-attainment, there are increasingly more stringent requirements that EPA will apply to our area until we meet the air quality standard.
Making sure everybody's paying attention.
And then for industry, it will require additional expensive air pollution control equipment. And if you look back at our inventory there, the sources that we have under our jurisdiction is about 5%. So it would put a very big burden on industry if we needed to get the reductions from that area. The regional transportation plan will need a revision, which will include transportation conformity and a motor vehicle budget. Those are binding, and the regional transportation plan must conform to air quality plans, or FHWA will not approve the RTP. Emission offsets are a possibility, up to 1.5 to 1. So backing up a little bit, so it doesn't put a halt onto growth, it just makes it tougher for new and expanding businesses to come to our area. If we move further down the line, the federal government or EPA could basically take our air quality program and run it at the federal level, and that could tie into loss of federal highway dollars for capacity projects. Federal highway dollars would still be available for efficiency projects, but for capacity projects, those dollars would disappear. So some of the takeaways here are that business as usual means meeting code, meeting minimum requirements, also means 100% or more of the ozone standard. Transportation choices are directly tied in with our ozone concentrations. So the more transportation choices we have, the less VMT we'll see. And the corollary to that is if we have few transportation choices, we're going to see worse air quality. Planning Commission can encourage better than business as usual projects, especially outside the urban core in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 lands. And if you don't want to support Ozone Advance, you can still support these other programs, which Ozone Advance will get these side benefits as well. So the master plan, the recently adopted Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, and these other plans all tie together. So when you benefit or support one, you support them all. And with that, I appreciate the time and giving me the opportunity to talk to the commission, and available for any questions.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Commissioners, do you have some questions for Daniel? Commissioner Gower or Commissioner Hawkins, sorry.
Yes, question. This would be the third time I've asked it in as many years. There's a lot of cars on the road there that say they're a custom rod or a classic car, when in fact there's been no work done to them, and they look worse now than they probably ever have. And last time you told me you're still working with the legislature on this so we can eliminate some of these cars, because if you don't see it smoking, they'll let it go, and it shouldn't be that way.
Correct. the legislature, the way it was written, really had some loopholes in there. There was a subcommittee that prepared a report with options to close those loopholes. The report was out there. It was ready for a legislator to adopt it and run with it. It was basically our game plan to improve air quality and take that loophole out with the classic vehicles. We could not find a legislator to carry that through or sponsor that. So it's there, and we'll be trying for it again in the next session. But to your point, yes, these smoking vehicles or these vehicles that don't meet the smog check program and the smog check program requirements do emit a disproportionate amount of air pollution compared to a new vehicle today.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gower?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Digesting this information and kind of trying to take it in, I know we've had a lot of discussions about this over the last couple of years now since the city adopted the resolution to support the program, and we've been seeing the letters come into our packets. We've talked about strategies of how to address this, and kind of boiling it down. So I see it as we've set the vision of where we want to go in the regional plan, in the master plan. Sustainability and climate action plan give us some tools to be able to get there. Dan, you talked about, kind of how they all tie together and some of the opportunities moving forward to achieve that vision. And what that vision is to reduce that VMT, concentrating growth, that urban form and pattern that we talk about, providing that connectivity, all of the things that you included in your presentation. So taking that vision, it seems like there are opportunities that we have as a commission, as a city, to build that into, one, the Title 18 process that they're working on now to codify some of these things with essentially creating tools in the toolbox that we can use at that code level. And then I think where this commission has kind of run into some hurdles is how do we take the information that we're receiving here? We know that we're kind of up against a challenge, that we know we have this vision that we're looking to get to, that we're trying to achieve, but project by project, it can be difficult to make decisions on, does this have, impacts on ozone attainment? Does this have, just broader environmental impacts on air quality, greenhouse gas emissions if you take it, a step further? So I think what I'd like to see and what I'd like to discuss or have the commission discuss is how can we, one, build in some strategies to address this challenge as part of Title 18. And I know, Dan, you've been working with the group a little bit to talk about cool roofs and trip reduction programs and other strategies, but maybe there's some building design, site design standards that we can have a little bit more of a discussion on. And then the other piece of it that I'd really like to see is some tools that we have in our toolbox, project by project, and if it means, refining the findings a little bit, so we have that decision point that we can lock in and say, okay, this project is in, tier 3. We know it's going to have an impact on VMT. It's going to increase VMT. So what strategies do we have in the toolbox to implement for this project, special use permit, tentative map, whatever it is, in that tier 3? And that's going to be different than a project in the core, because in the core, we want to make sure that we're promoting opportunities for the walkability index that Dan talked about. And that really comes down to connectivity, number one, making sure at that macro scale that we're that the site fits in with everything else around it, and there's opportunities to connect bike, pedestrian level connectivity, but it's also a design thing. We want people to be comfortable and have the opportunity to be comfortable when they're walking. So things like shade trees that have the dual purpose of providing that outdoor space and reducing the urban heat island. So I think that's the kind of discussion that I'd like to have with the commission, because we can have Dan come back and talk to us once a year, and he's going to tell us the same thing, that the ozone is going up and growth is continuing, but we're going to be faced with the same challenges. So how can we, as a commission, create the decision points and the tools that we need to make positive decisions to meet the challenge? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Gower. Commissioner Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. I wasn't here with some of your other ones, and I totally agree with what you were saying, Commissioner Gower. I have a question because I'm trying to digest all of this. Is there a number where we're out of attainment? Like we're at 0.071. What is the non-attainment number?
The standard is 70 parts per billion, and we are at 71 parts per billion. So we violate the standard. So that's the first step towards a non-attainment designation. I'll give you a spoiler alert here. For 2019, the preliminary data showed some improvement. So our 2019 value will be 70, which is 100% of the standard. So the trigger point, the threshold is 70. Anything above 70 is violating or not meeting the standard.
So I guess when does the EPA say you're not in attainment and these negative things start happening as far as funding, and we have other people come in and tell us what we need to be doing with our air quality management?
Again, the first step would be related to our air monitoring data. So based on 2018 data, EPA could come in and say, hey, you violate the standard, we're going to designate you non-attainment. There are some episodes within 2016, 2017, and 2018, especially that EPA has a path that we can take to exclude some of the data, and those would be related to the wildfire events. If you remember 2018, we had quite a bit of smoke from wildfire. EPA has a path where we can exclude those from this calculation. Regardless of that, there's quite a bit of homegrown pollution here.
So in 2008, when we were higher than we are now, did EPA come in and start taking those negative steps that you talked about?
They did not, because the standard, there was a 1997 standard. In 2008, they reviewed the standard and found that lower levels of pollution cause public health issues. So they revised the standard. So the 2018 standard is 75 parts per billion. In 2015, they reviewed the standard again, and as we get more and more science, we see that lower levels of air pollution affect more of us. So the standard of 70 parts per billion was set with what EPA says is an adequate margin of safety to protect public health.
I struggle personally when making decisions. We have some ambiguous, it seems, findings where we bring in air quality when we're trying to make decisions on almost all of the things that come before this body. And I get the memos that you guys provide, the comments, and they seem, I imagine you're super busy too, sort of generic. Like this one memo has 5 different cases on it and it all says the same thing. So will there come a time when your agency would provide more specific information based on the project, to what Commissioner Gower was saying, when we have developments out in Tier 2 where you might say, this is, the air quality will suffer so much with this project or whatever it is, we recommend against it?
When we first began to submit agency comments, we were providing them for each specific project. In discussions with city staff, we agreed that because these comments are pretty common across the board, or there's a lot of common issues related to it, that we would combine the comments into a single comment for what we're going to be doing moving forward. If there's a specific project that we feel we need to address specifically, let's say a tentative map or a master plan update, then we would specifically address that one and give specific details related to that. But for about the past year, we've been lumping these comments together. I think with the regional plan update, that can give you some more clarity on what areas or where these projects are located, which areas are going to be of more concern to address some of these issues. For instance, if it was a project in the Tier 1 area or urban core, then things like connectivity, or I shouldn't say that, but things like an EV charging ready infrastructure may not be as important in the urban core as it would be in a Tier 3 area, if that makes sense.
Sure, some of that Tier 2, Tier 3 land, it seems, is a little bit more affordable. And again, we're faced with an affordable housing challenge, I mean, crisis almost. So it's really hard for me on this commission to make the balance of, what's the price of compliance? And we all want to be in conformance here, but we want people to have houses to live in too. So when we go into that planning workshop next week, when we start talking about some of the findings, the administrative procedures, it would be interesting to see if there would be some concrete information that we could use when trying to make these findings. That would be super helpful to me. So when does it go from voluntary to mandatory?
When EPA tells us it is, which means when we're designated non-attainment, then the clock starts. We have 3 years to meet the standard.
So what about on a local level?
On the local level, it would apply to us. The Air Quality Management Division is responsible for making sure that our area meets the air quality standards. So we would take some of these voluntary measures, and if we don't see improvements in air quality, then we would change those from voluntary to mandatory, or adjust some of them, like the employee trip reduction program, from 50 to maybe 25 employees.
So you could adjust it from voluntary to mandatory
Correct.
when the air
correct.
quality requires that.
Yeah, and maybe a comment on things like EV charging ready infrastructure or prep for solar generation. If we look at those as investments instead of costs, then maybe that can help in the long-term vision of what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, additional questions? Commissioner Marshall?
Thank you, Dan, for the presentation again. I think I've asked this question, but I'm not positive. Have you guys done modeling to show if we build out our tentative maps already approved and where their locations, what our VMT and consequently what our emissions going to look like?
We have not done specific modeling, but that is something that we are working towards. We are improving our inventory so we get better spatial and temporal data related to that. And once we get those emissions refined to that level, then we can coordinate with regional planning and RTC to do those different scenarios. We do work with the Regional Transportation Commission on their RTP and their short-term plan as well. There are currently motor vehicle emission budgets for more of the valley portion of the Reno Sparks area, and it applies to carbon monoxide and PM10. We don't have a budget for ozone yet because we were not non-attainment. So with PM10 and carbon monoxide, we were non-attainment, improved air quality, and the motor vehicle emissions budgets are EPA's way to ensure that we don't backslide.
I guess I would suggest that if really the question about where and how we grow is critical to our ozone budget, that it would be useful and I think quite compelling if we had that kind of information to say, here's what we've already approved. If it's built, here's what's going to happen. You know, obviously we can't, you know, you have to take into account some degree of economic impact in terms of this economic cycles. But I think it's that would make your story, I think, even more compelling as to particularly where our growth patterns are going to be. And I would just like to emphasize that I also agree with Commissioner Gower's comments and look forward to specifically discussing some of these items when Chapter 18 and maybe in other venues as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Totally agree. We have the qualitative story on our ozone, but I agree with you that having the quantitative data to back that up will make the story more compelling and help you focus on specific areas or programs within the community.
I'm sorry, doesn't RTC do outward modeling for out-year modeling, like, you know, 20, 30, 40 years out on various pollutants, or they have to be non-attainment pollutants?
The current plan is through 2040. They just kicked off their 2050 update. They do modeling out to 2015. For the pollutants that have the motor vehicle emissions budget, those are the pollutants that we have been non-attainment for. Ozone isn't included currently.
Do they model they model VMT?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you have those figures, and so those might be useful to see in a presentation like this of where our VMT compared to current levels is going.
Agree. Thank you. Taking the VMT, we can tie in the emissions, but then there's the equation for ozone is NOx, ozone, or NOx, VOC, and sunlight, and that's that chemical reaction. That's an area where we need extra capacity to model the photochemical reaction to that. So we're getting the first couple of steps in place, and then we can do quite a bit with that model once we have the inputs nailed down. Thank you.
Commissioners, any additional questions? Just want to follow up, Commissioner Gower. I think one of the interesting things that you bring up and looking at this from a presentation in terms of where development is and how on the Planning Commission we look at that, I think the piece that comes after us, and I think is part of what Commissioner Gower alluded to is, as you say, it's that building piece as well. It's not just where people are traveling from, it's what are the structures that they're doing. So I think we have a little bit of input on that from a Title 18 standpoint with respect to some materials, and I think you mentioned that. But I guess I'm curious, has there been conversation, or are you involved locally when the regions do their code updates, building code updates? Because there's always a Northern Nevada set of amendments to that. Have you been involved in those discussions that they have about every 3 years?
We have not. We've been engaged with on the Title 18 update with City of Reno, but with the other jurisdictions, not as much.
Okay, so I think that's certainly, it's one thing when we see the recommendations to build an energy efficient or a LEED building, but we're not at the stage where that's something that we can review. So I think that's another area where I'd like to see some input, because while it's not necessarily as easy to quantify, or not that it's necessarily easy to quantify vehicle miles traveled, but when you start looking at the efficiency of the built environment and you start looking at some of the other things that you mentioned for roofs and parking areas, and that has a very large impact too, in a way that can be directly quantified in perpetuity, because once it's there you can see the difference. So I think that would be something, I guess, looking forward, I would encourage maybe a conversation with our own code officials, since I think our building officials the head of that, or was recently the head of the group that was doing the adoption on that, so we can see if maybe we can get a little involvement in that. But again, I want to echo the commissioners. Thank you for the presentation, keeping us up to date and looking at what we have, and we'll look forward to some changes as we move forward with the new Title 18 and how that will hopefully impact the information we get with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. With that, I will move on in the agenda item to our public hearings. Item 6.1, case number LDC 20-00002, Verdi Boat and RV Storage. And we will start with a presentation from the applicant's representative.
Good evening. For the record, Dave Snellgrove, Planning and Right-of-Way Manager at CFA. With me in the audience tonight is John Steiber with Creation Funding, who is the project applicant. The project that you have before you is a boat and RV storage, which we feel is very well located right off of the freeway. Some of the things we were talking about in terms of reduction of vehicle miles traveled, convenient location I'll go through. And locationally, it's basically at the gateway and doorway out to a lot of the recreational areas that we enjoy living here in northern Nevada with Boca, Stampede, Donner, Tahoe, and so on. The project location is on the east side of I-80 off of exit 2. It's highlighted here in the blue area. It's a 3.9 acre property. But I have this map here, which is off of the Washoe County GIS that shows the contours of the site. The eastern 1.3 acres, so third of the site, slopes down to the river. We are not proposing any development on that. We are actually not proposing that any water drain down that way. Any grading in association with the site will be directed back over this way and into a detention basin here and here, which everything will come over to the west rather than going to the east. So I want to make sure that that's clear. Locationally, off of the off-ramp where the freeway off-ramp starts, and you have the painted point that you can go off in one lane or the other. Our access point, and you'll see it in our site plan later, our egress point is approximately 1/4 of a mile from where that off-ramp lane starts. We are directly across the street or across the freeway, I guess I should say, from Gold Ranch and the RV park in association with Gold Ranch. The property is in the city of Reno. It was brought in the city of Reno in the early mid-2000s. The property does have City of Reno zoning as community commercial. It's master plan for suburban mixed use. Those two master plan and the zoning are conformant with one another. The special use permit requests that we have before you tonight. We have mini warehouse project in the CC zone, which is allowed with the special use permit. So we're here seeking that primarily. We have a request for an extension of hours. Happy to have a dialogue and discussion if you feel that there's some question about that. This would allow people to go in and out of the facility. If they're coming back late, they could drop off their boat or RV after the hours. Or we could have lockout times if you so choose and feel that would make you more comfortable. And then we also have non-residential use adjacent to residentially zoned property. I'm going to point out all this property right here is community commercial zoned. And this portion here is county land. And part of it is low-density suburban, which is a residential zone. And part of it is general commercial, this parcel here. And I'll have a county zoning map. So there's some commercial and there's some residential. And then across the river, there is some large lot residential, one dwelling unit per acre property. So that is really our nearest residential land, that and then this right here. So those are the two. When we get into residential adjacency, those are the ones I'll be pointing to. The CC zone allows for a lot of different uses. One of them is with the special use permit, you could have mini warehouse, which includes boat and RV storage. I wanted to highlight some of the uses that are allowed by right under the use table. Now, where this is located, you'd have some residential adjacency issues, but the types of uses that are allowed in CC by right in the use table: auto repair and garages, retail bakery, commercial landscape material, lumberyard, call center, commercial cleaners, drive-through facilities, restaurants with or without alcohol service, gas stations, food processing, wholesale bakery. I didn't pull all of them out. I gave a sample of some of them. All of these would end up presenting a higher impact relative to traffic in and out and other impacts of the site. One of the things I'm going to point out tonight very clearly with my presentation is this is a very low impact development that we're proposing. We feel the project is a needed use and a good fit for the location. There's been rapid growth in the area, and a lot of that rapid growth has been in smaller lots. I've represented some of them in the downtown core where really it's condominium or apartment project. A lot of people still have toys, and the toys need a storage area. You've seen a lot of these come through, and I know you're probably sick of mini storage, boat and RV storage, and I can understand that, but it is demanded. There is a definite need for it. And a lot of the smaller housing sizes or HOAs that don't allow for storage of boats or RVs outside of a garage, that necessitates a lot of this. The project is not disturbed with its traffic, doesn't disturb the core of Verdi. Going to have about 14 average daily trips as estimated using the Institute of Traffic Engineers counts. What that equates to, each single-family home typically generates about 9.5 trips per day. So it's about a house and a half is how much traffic this would generate. So very low impact on the traffic. My clients have done their research before they jumped in feet first with this, and they found that many of the places have wait lists for boats and RV storage. We feel that this is ideally located, access to Boca, Stampede, Donner, Tahoe, and so on. People can basically come back into town if they live in the heart of Reno, maybe they live over in Sparks. They could drop their boat or RV off before they even get into the heavier traffic areas of town. And on the way out, too, they can have things loaded up, pick up their boat or RV, and head on out. So that's where I get to the reduction of vehicle miles traveled. I think there's some benefit there. It's quick and easy on and off ramp to the freeway. Overall low impact use, we do not have, there is no community water or sewer out in this area. We'll see the map again later, but this is in City of Reno proper, but in talking to the city, there's no plans on the drawing board to get water and sewer out here. It's probably 3 or 4 miles away. So you got to work with what you have. We have proposed no sewer generation coming out of this. We don't have bathroom. We don't have manager's quarters. We don't have a lot of things. We're not going to have a septic and leach field. There are concerns that neighbors have, and I think rightly so, about their existing wells and potential contamination of those. So we're trying to go very low impact with this, and we feel that it can be accomplished with this project. We have done some redesign to the project. We originally submitted this in July of last year. We went to the Neighborhood Advisory Board in August. We had some very good comments that came out from the neighbors, from the NAB, and also we went to a staff app meeting and had staff comments from fire, planning, and so on. We went back and incorporated those comments and made changes to that plan, and the plan, and I'll highlight those as we go through. So some of the changes that we did make, there's a question about kind of tapering. There, you'll hear tonight, and I'm sure that I'll identify people coming off at a high rate of speed, having some type of taper for people getting on into or out of the site. NDOT identified, and it was also brought up at the NAB level, having some type of an acceleration, deceleration type area. So there's a type 5 approach that's been incorporated into the plan. This is both per NAB and the NDOT consultation. The project's been downsized. Originally, we had about 100 spaces. We're down to 77. The storage on the north part of the property is shaped like an L, and I'll show you that in a minute. We've actually eliminated storage from there, and that helped save some trees, which present screening to one of our nearest neighbors, and also it gave us additional stacking because there was a question, and I feel a valid question, about making sure that RVs or boats, where they're hauling back in, that they're not backing up into the frontage road right-of-way. We'll have a water tank in association with this of 16,000 plus gallons that meets the NFPA 1142 standards. I don't know. Oh, we do have Trey here tonight. Trey Palmer is here from, we've worked and discussed a lot. He probably got sick of talking to us after a while, but we did find something that can work with the rural-esque standards because we don't have community water or sewer out in this area. That water tank, there is no water service up in this area. That water tank will be available for Truckee Meadows Fire, Reno Fire Department. If there's an emergency up there, it is a supply of water where none exists. You'll probably hear, well, that's not enough water. You know what? That's more water than you have right now. So that will be available for the fire protection, not only for this property, but if there's an emergency on another property. Directional island has been added. There was concern about people going the wrong way because this is a freeway off-ramp. At a point, you get to signs that say do not enter, There's not a real turnaround, so we have a directional island that points people out to go to the right, which gets you to all your freeway off-ramps. The NDOT has required that we put signage, painting on the road, and we'll work with them on what's necessary for that, for directional, additional directional information. But we tried to design it right into the egress. Project no longer shows there was a gated emergency access onto Orange Post Road, and the neighbors who access and use Orange Post Road were adamantly against that. We have taken that out of the project. I will address lighting right out of the gate here. Lighting will be on sensors and be shut off unless the site is in use. The exception to this is going to be anything that the Reno Police Department says that we have to have some minimal security lighting. That is addressed in the staff report as well. I'm not sure what level that'll be at, but we're trying to make sure this meets dark skies lighting and is very, very minimal. Security will be 24-hour security monitoring with cameras and motion sensors. As I mentioned, we don't have a manager's quarters. This will all be remotely censored, and you can access this through the security system, getting in through a state-of-the-art system, same type of system that is used by Public Storage, the largest mini storage provider in the country. You can get in through your smartphone, keypads. The video monitoring will be linked up, and if someone's in there, the cameras will be going. If the lights are on at night, you'll know someone's in there. If they're not supposed to be in there, they will be picked up on the video, and security can be called out. A grading of the site has been designed so that we don't have water from this development site going down to the river. It will be going to the west. So I want to make sure that's clear. That was some questions at the NAB level that I want to make sure that is clearly understood. Retention area on the western side will only collect water from landscape area. Now get down towards our site plan and show you where that is. And there is an access that comes out. There's a driveway that comes out. We're retaining the right for access across that to the property owner to the east of us, which is right in here. I'll show you this site plan. This is our old site plan. This is the one we originally submitted, which had 48 or 49,000 square foot of storage area. We did have development up here on the north. This access in here didn't have enough stacking in some of the concerns that we heard from NDOT, from the city, also some questions that came from the neighbors. And we did have an access down here as well that came out to Orange Post Road, which is a private access road. So our modified site plan, you can look at this. We had a retention basin up here. Now we go to our modified site plan. We have no development on the north area. What we have is the parking lot and stacking area. We have parking spaces because we've decreased the area of overall impervious surface. We have a smaller retention area. We do have a retention area located here, and there was some concern that that would flow down to the river. Everything from this point on will grade back towards the west. The only thing that this retention area will pick up is any of the water that might come out of this landscape area in a bigger storm or something, and it would collect here, and then it would go into the ground. We have a valley gutter system. We'll have catch basins that will treat water for petrochemicals. It'll have a oil water separator, as is detailed in the City of Reno Orange Book standards, and I have a copy of that if you'd like to look at that. I can put that on the overhead. Mentioned 14 average daily trips, equivalent of about 1.5 houses. We'll have no wash bays, dump stations, waste retail sales, repair or service on the site. This will basically be an access in where you can park your vehicle, your boat or RV, and move on your way. Trees that'll be retained on the site. This is a grove here of evergreens that before we had coming out. Tree here, we actually picked up a setback area with the redesign, and tree here, and then the trees down along Orange Post Road weren't anticipated to be saved. There was going to be some relocation of that road before, and now we're going to leave that road as it is. All the trees down here have always been proposed for saving. We're not disturbing anything down by the river. This is a canopy-covered project, but I know you've seen really beautiful examples of of mini storage that have canopies, or either with or without canopies, and you get a 6-foot wall or a chain link with slats, and either the fifth wheel or the diesel pusher or whatever the trailer is goes up higher than that over that. We previously had actual buildings, but that hit some of the issues with the fire code, and we worked with Trey quite extensively on it. The canopies allow us to go to the rural standard for fire treatment and fire suppression. What we wanted to do is make the exterior of this look like a building, even though it's not a building. So what you have is a 6-foot wall. You have your canopy, and there will be a curtain wall that comes down from the canopy. So your 6-foot wall will be slightly offset to your curtain wall. They'll be attached to make sure that they have stability, but it'll just be holding those from a stability standpoint, but they won't come all the way, they won't come all the way down and connect with one another, one on top of the other. The intent here is to make the exterior of this look like a building, even though it isn't. You're gonna have areas where you can see in here, the sides would be open here as you're coming down the freeway, like this view here. This would be open and that would be open. So the intent with our landscaping is to go to all evergreens through those areas and try and create a year-round screening. Our water tank location will be here, and as I mentioned, that'll be accessible to the fire department. Residential adjacency, the two nearest residentially zoned properties that the nearest homes on those, this one's about over 970 feet away. The one across the river is over 525 feet away. The other properties that do have some residential uses on them are both designated commercial. I won't go through this, I'll just finish up. We feel that we have a very low impact site because of the way it's been designed, the number of units, the low traffic. We're in agreement with the staff and the recommendation. We do believe that all of the findings can be made. I have each one of the findings. If you have any that you're having a question on, I'd be happy to go through those. With that, I'll close my presentation, be available for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Dave. We'll call you up with questions after we hear from staff. Brooke, good evening.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Brooke Oswald, Associate Planner for the record. Michelle, can I have the overhead up very quickly? So in submittal of the staff report, there was an omittance of a condition, that's condition 11. It is referenced within the staff report itself. That condition deals with signage. Specifically, with the highway and to limit overall impacts of the signage, what we have done is take the standards from the community commercial, which will allow for a 30-foot pole height and no limitations on illumination. We have conditioned that so that it is at a neighborhood commercial level. That neighborhood commercial level limits that to a 12-foot monument sign and indirect illumination. Staff finds that appropriate due to the location, the sensitivity of that, and the overall light impacts of that. We have run by the applicant, and they are okay with that. They don't feel that advertising that is critical, and we feel that that is sufficient. Additionally, the applicant was heard at the Ward 5 NAB last night. Several comments were received at that NAB, and those were forwarded to Planning Commission. Additionally, a letter was received by Scenic Nevada within the last 2 days. That has also been forwarded to Planning Commission. That letter dealt mainly with the existing trees on the site and a number and those issues, not signage or other issues as they normally comment on. The applicant did a very thorough job of kind of going over the overall project, the site, the considerations. Once again, looking at the general area and the overview of that area. We do have a casino, a gas station, and RV storage across the thing. Large traffic generators generally in that area. Those are all using the exit 2, both eastbound and westbound there, noting that that RV park and those RVs are adequately using those on and off ramps to access that site. The star is signifying the project site. The orange area directly above that, there is a residence that lies directly behind that project. That is, zoning is community commercial on that. And so does not apply to the residential adjacency standards per the SUP. The other two sites, as mentioned, are the site to the east, that is approximately 550 from the developed project site. That is also about 90 feet below the project itself. Additionally, that other home is about 550 to 600 feet, an additional 90 feet below the project itself. The access to those homes come up Hirsch Road, which is just below that. They have maintained that easement for them to access and to go there. As was mentioned, the project site and their access is about 1,300 feet from the exit, and that is posted at 35 miles an hour directly in front of that site. Additionally, we are looking at the Truckee River corridor. As they had mentioned, they are preserving the trees along that and maintaining that green corridor and natural sort of wildlife pathway that lies along the Truckee River. Special use permit, the mini warehouse community zoning, what we're really looking at is the appropriate that use with surrounding uses. It is allowed within that zone with the SUP, the extended hours of operations. As were mentioned, we're looking at impacts that are associated with that project. It has relatively low impacts. Those extended hours of operations with 14 vehicle trips per day, we would not anticipate that we would see large levels of noise nor glare at that. Additionally, that site is walled, and the ambient noise of I-80 would overcome any noise. It's anticipating any noise that would be generated from those extended hours. The commercial development adjacent to residentially zoned property, as we mentioned, those properties are significantly geographically distanced from the project itself. RV and boat storage, looking at the analysis in the proposed project, this has lower overall impacts than other allowed uses, as was demonstrated. There are similar uses in close proximity. This is a normal use that we would anticipate off our highway exits and other sort of car-oriented uses. The allowed height in our community commercial zoning is 65 feet high. They are proposing 18 feet. That's that 6-foot wall and approximately about 12 feet above that, so much lower than the allowed height. The average trips per day is 14 trips per day. Staff did reach out to NDOT to request that they be here. They had stated that they would be here tonight. I was notified last night that they are not going to be able to attend because of scheduling. I did forward on a letter from NDOT. NDOT states that the average trips per day were 70. In looking and reviewing this, that is a discrepancy of they are using the warehouse use for their average trips per day. This is calculated on mini warehouse use. The location really limits any impacts of surrounding or going through neighborhoods or other areas where we would really anticipate that. As the applicant mentioned, it's directly off the highway, so on and off access really limits that overall traffic impacts on surrounding neighborhoods. Noise, glare, odors, those things that we usually look for, those impacts on surrounding or residential areas are minimal in this. We do have with the mini warehouse additional requirements that are required. Those are no automotive or maintenance, no selling of goods, a number of those things that further protect water quality and those other sort of things from happening there. That proximity of the residentially zoned properties, it is far enough away that any glare or noise, we're not anticipating that has any impact on those properties. Once again, those existing surrounding uses, the main impact that we had is that residential unit that lies directly behind that. We have a 6-foot CMU wall in the area that will limit any light glare. There are also those maintained existing trees, and there is existing solid fence between those that would limit light glare into that property. The access to any adjacent properties has been maintained. To the property directly to the east and adjacent to the site is maintained, and then down Hirsch Road or Orange Post Road, that has been maintained. As was mentioned, limited utilities in close proximity to the project. That really, that modified this project and proposal drastically. As we move through fire, not having water service and not having sewer, this does become an appropriate use for sort of the utilities that are provided there. And with the modification of removing the buildings, the fire code can come back under that 1142 and be used. Trey Palmer is here to answer more questions on that. The access to NDOT is on that roadway exit 2. All permits, design criteria, everything will be handled with NDOT on there. They have looked at the project. They have made suggestions. The applicant has worked with them to verify that they're meeting their standards. They will have to get their permits through NDOT before they'll be permitted to move forward. Those low traffic volumes coming off of there, I spoke with NDOT. We're seeing about 800 vehicle trips a day coming off that exit. They said it was relatively low. They had very little concern about the traffic that this was going to generate. The applicant has moved forward, will make any signage or any corrections that need to be made to accommodate their project. Those easements associated with the project, as I mentioned, the easement is maintained down Orange Post Road. The access has been maintained to the property that is adjacent to that property. Should be noted that property directly adjacent, the owner that owns that owns the property to the north of that project site. There is also access to that behind property through that neighboring property also. Stormwater, as we mentioned, we're strict. This is not our normal detention where we are detaining and letting go. This is a retention system. Everything will be perked. They have been designed to a 100-year storm event, which is the requirement. We do have that proximity to the Truckee River and that the concerns that come with the discharge of any pollutants or anything through our Public Works Design Manual and others. Those will be handled. Also, as a condition, they are required to provide a storm water management handbook that will detail how they will manage and take care of those retention systems and how those will be maintained. As stated, Title 18 of Public Works Design Manual has additional requirements and standards that will protect that water. The project, has been redesigned, and with that redesign, it does meet the 1142 standards. They are a rural development standard. There will be a water tank and pump provided on site. That water tank and pump will be used to fight fires there, but will also be able to be used by Reno Fire Department in case of other emergencies in the area. The proposed site meets all the access and circulation required by the Reno Fire Department. The storage area is contained with a non-combustible material, which means that fire is, in theory, contained with a non-combustible CMU wall, and so fighting that and its spread becomes limited in that way. The emergency access has been provided to that secured area through one of the conditions. They'll provide a Knox block or another way so that if fire needs to, they can access this site. It wasn't fully, but there will be no management on this site or anything. This will be a 100% remotely controlled site. Access will be through either cell phones or other mechanisms, and then the site will have cameras that will be monitored, and with that 24-hour would be monitored 24 hours a day. Fire and police have reviewed that, feel comfortable with that security system and that ability to access or monitor that site. So with that, with the application and the materials presented by the applicant and the conditions as applied through the staff report, staff can make all applicable findings and recommends approval of the project. Myself, Mike Michelle, Planning Manager, Trey Palmer are all here for questions as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Before we get to questions, I'm going to open it up for public comment. And before I do that, I'm going to ask for disclosures from the commission. I'm going to start with Commissioner Olivas.
Commissioner Olivas, I visited the site and received email.
Commissioner Marshall, I've read a lot of emails.
Commissioner Taylor, I received emails and read them.
Commissioner Johnson received and read emails and familiar with the site.
Commissioner Hawkins visited the site, emails, and spoke to the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Gower, familiar with the site and received and read the emails.
Okay. With that, I'm going to open up public comment. I have several request to speak forms on this. So just a couple of things. First of all, I apologize for misspelling or mispronouncing of anybody's name. I'll do that in advance. You'll have 3 minutes when you get to the podium, and I would ask that you please state your name for the record before you start with your public comment. With that, I will begin with Addie Argyris, followed by Steve Oldham.
Good evening, Addie Argyris for the record. I want to point out that the original project was for enclosed storage buildings with fire alarms and sprinklers. It was revised to open storage with canopies because the fire marshal would not approve the plan without city water for the fire protection. The fuel, oil leaks, grease, propane tanks all pose a fire hazard as well as a hazmat problem. We've heard tonight that there are no buildings being proposed. It's not a building. It's designed to look like a building, but it's not. You can see through it when driving by. There's a 6-foot wall to hold the canopies. Staff refers to this as mini warehouses. This is open storage with a hat on it, and that's not permitted in community commercial. And additionally, the entrance to this is in close proximity to the I-80 off-ramp. This is a head-on collision. Vehicles exit that off-ramp at high rates of speed. The driver that caused this head-on was going 80 to 100 miles per hour when he hit the Lear family. They were approximately at the entrance to this facility here. And the large RVs and trucks with trailer rigs are going to be moving slow. They're long in length, and they will be turning across access against traffic that's coming off the freeway. The vehicles exiting the freeway are not expecting this, and they will not be able to stop in time to avoid a collision. The RVs and trucks with trailers are not going to be able to move fast enough to avoid being hit. More accidents like this are going to happen. I responded to this call, and occupants from both vehicles had to be extricated. But again, this is open storage in community commercial, and the use is not consistent with the surrounding residential area or the zoning, and it's not appropriate for this location. Thank you.
Next, Steve Oldham, followed by John Larea.
Thank you. My name is Steve Oldham. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association out there on Hirsch Road. I live at 45 Hirsch Road, Verde, Nevada. At the outset, I want to make it clear that none of those directly impacted by this project has asked for this project to be killed. We've only asked for our concerns to be addressed. In August 2019, we learned of this project. The sponsors did not notify any of our homeowners, including the Whites, whose property abuts the proposed parcel, which they were obligated to do. When we saw the plan for the first time at the NAB meeting in August, we learned that the sponsors planned on using Orange Post Road as an exit point for the boat and RV storage. We presented our deed that established our exclusive right-of-way and was not available to other uses, importantly, without our agreement, except for the Evans property to the north, in accordance with the deed. To this day, they have not even one time asked for our permission to use the Orange Post Road. We made our concerns well known at the meeting, including the following: adequate fire suppression equipment, improvements to Orange Post Road to enhance firefighting access and emergency exit for the homeowners, a landscaping plan that enhanced the look of Orange Post Road on both sides, including our right to approve that plan, recognition of existing easements and right-of-ways, and agreements on any modifications that were required, impacts of the 2 water wells situated very near the project. We also talked about the exit ramp and that for their customer safety and the safety of the people exiting the freeway, they must address those high speeds. They also must address a likely issue of one of their customers passing the entrance by accident because there is no turnaround on this road that dead ends into the freeway exit. The only option is to back up a rig with a trailer, remembering that there's a busy freeway on-ramp not far behind. After the meeting, we were told that they would have to take a look at the access on Orange Post and that widening the road and landscaping would not cost much if done during the construction of the facility, leading us to believe they would pay for the necessary safety improvements. The Whites received a notice of this meeting tonight, and I got a call from John Stieber about meeting with me to discuss the project. He asked for a meeting before Christmas, but did not agree to a date until 4 days before the NAB last night. John and his consultant met with us, and we walked the project, but none of our concerns were addressed in the revised plan. In fact, the plan is significantly worse for the safety of their customers and the safety of nearby residents. The new project was changed to canopy design rather than enclosed garage types. This allowed the sponsors to save enormous amounts on construction, but more importantly, it negated the requirement for any fire suppression, which was required in the original design. Now they incorrectly claim that they assuaged our concerns about using Orange Post Road, which was never mentioned by us. We simply pointed out it was an exclusive right-of-way, and they never, not one time, asked for permission to use Orange Post Road. Our concern was widening the road to accommodate firefighting equipment, which the sponsors had verbally agreed to. However, at last night's NAB meeting, they explicitly took necessary safety improvements on Orange Post Road off the table. So now the proposed project has no fire suppression, fire alarms, or adequate access for firefighting equipment. That with their project barriers, or those walls going into place, there's nowhere to go around a fire engine now. It may not allow our residents to evacuate if firefighting equipment is on Orange Post Road. The project location is in a delayed response zone where first responders may take up to 20 minutes or more to respond. This is particularly true when the westbound I-80 lanes are closed due to weather, and it happens all the time. They still have to acknowledge the existing right-of-ways or easement marks and in fact have ignored or realigned them in this design without so much as a conversation with any of the impacted parties. I retained an engineering firm to overlay the existing easements on the proposed project plan. The engineering work proves they are proposing to build directly on top of existing easements with no conversation with the easement owners. Further, they are not planning any sanitary facilities on project to serve their customers, impacting their customers' convenience and hygiene. And finally, after acknowledging to me and others on at least 3 occasions that they recognize the safety issues of the high-speed exit traffic, their own response each time, including at the NAB last night, was that the people exiting I-80 at speed are breaking the law. This attitude is a direct conflict with their duty to provide for the facility, a facility that can safely be used for their customers who are adding to the traffic problem.
Steve, I'm going to have you wrap it up. I gave you an extra minute.
Okay, you gave them 15. I know it's difficult. Thank you.
3 minutes for public comment. Thank you. John Larea, followed by David Salinger.
Hello, everybody. My name is John Larea. I live in the area, and I'm for the construction project for the storage for the RV unit. And basically, the reason is, as you drive up in my neighborhood, you see boats and RVs in people's driveways, just or dotting the landscape, and it's everywhere. And like times like springtime and in the wintertime, when they're trying to get their boats and RVs out and in, it's actually blocking our roads to be able to get to our homes. Kids are playing in that area. People are walking their dogs, and I just think. And I would never want to restrict their rights to be able to keep their RVs on their property. But I think that if there was a nearby option to be able to store their RVs and their boats, I think that would be that'd be a great option for them. It'd actually clean up our neighborhoods. I think it'd make the roads safer. It'd make our sidewalks safer. So I think it would actually be a great thing. I mean, there are RVs and boats everywhere. And so I think it'd be nice to have that RV. And plus, it's right by the highway. And, what else would you put there? So I'm for the construction. That's it. Thank you for your time.
David Salinger, followed by Ricky Alpert.
I'm David Salinger. I'd like to make a couple points. Is that this thing is a quarter mile from the freeway, and we actually took a speed gun out there. Steve did that, and we looked at the speeds that people are exiting. And right at Orange Post Road, where we are, the average speed is around 61. that was sort of an average, but the speeds certainly are much higher than that. And where the exit is right now, this is about 49. And so, if you think about it, at 60 miles an hour, when you're exiting that freeway, if you're only going 60, it's a quarter of a mile. You're talking about 15 seconds from where you start the turnoff to where you got to make your turn in a big RV or towing a trailer. It's not a lot of room. And people coming off, if they're going 70, which is very frequent coming off of that freeway on exit 2, you got a big boat and trailer, turning across that road. Here's a car coming, got 15 seconds now. This guy's starting to make his turn. He's coming at 70 miles an hour. Is he going to be able to stop? I don't know. Anyway, it's just not a good position for that thing to be. And I think we're just asking for trouble in that area, especially, if we got snow and the roads are a little slippery, it's raining, it's just going to be a disaster out there. Just last September, I-80 we had our snowfall, I-80 was closed westbound. The roads were backed up to Mogul. Emergency vehicle access pretty much shut off. You got trucks parked all along Old 40 along there. Trucks are parked all along. There's no way that coming across there, that overpass where you come off is really narrow. You got, big semis coming across there, big things. It makes it really, really dangerous. And right at that time, on that day, we had a semi come off on that exit 2, and it broke down. And so right where Orange Post Road is right here, this is where it crashed. It blocked access to that road. If we had a fire down there, someone had a medical emergency, there is no way of getting out. Luckily, we have this easement over here that we could borrow from Megan, and we were able to get out using this easement to get out here. But it was 8 hours for them to clear that exit right there. We met with the fire marshal. He said, anytime, any fire down in this area is going to be delayed, and at least 10 to 20 minute delay. They just don't have fire stations that are close enough. And I think, this spot there where they're trying to put this thing is just a horrible thing. It's going to be really bad. The speeds are too high. No matter what they say, people are supposed to be, keeping their speed down. It just isn't going to happen. I mean, just look at what it is right now. The other thing that my time's run out, so I don't know things. Thank you very much.
Ricky Alpert, followed by Erica White.
Yes, my name is Ricky Alpert. I live on Hirsch Road along the river. And I just want to validate what David Salinger said. Often I exit coming home from Truckee, where I work as a physician at the hospital there, and I come, and as I slow down after I make the exit, I'm terrified half the time that the car behind me is going to run right into me. They're speeding so fast, they barely have time to slow down, and the only thing that saves me is they can pass me because I have a small vehicle. But if I had an RV, there would just be no way that someone could, it just would be more of an obstacle, especially if they were making a turn into the storage facility. And no one has mentioned that these units, these RVs and storage present a fire hazard on their own because they have propane tanks and electrical systems, and there are risks. If you look just online, you'll see some of the disastrous explosions. And living down on Hirsch Road, we've already experienced one fire about 2 years ago that was across the river, but we need the fire department to be able to access coming down Hirsch Road. And right now, if it's not really wide enough to support their vehicles, they need a 20-foot width. And if they build their storage facility, it will encroach on the width of on Orange Post Road, which would allow fire department to come and save us. So it's scary. And also with this new canopy design, it doesn't allow for sprinkler system or fire alarm within the unit. So, it's just more hazardous, whereas the enclosed facility had the fire alarm and the sprinkler system within it. So I think we're putting a fire hazard right in our midst, and we're more removed from the safety of the fire department to rescue us. So it's a very scary situation, and I'm definitely opposed. And I would much rather have a commercial bakery there or a restaurant anytime rather than the storage unit. Thank you.
Erica White, followed by Brian White.
Good evening. My name is Erica White. I live at 350 Hirsch Road. Several questions that I know that you can't respond to, but I hope that you'll pay attention to, is I hope that you, the planning department, have received our comments from NAB 5, from last night's meeting, and from the meeting of August 2019. We have great concerns, and we want to be sure that there's accountability, that our comments have been received both by the planning and city, the city of Reno. Also, I would like to say that I'm here for the wildlife. They don't have the voices, and they're losing their habitat, which means that the more we build in their jurisdiction, the less we're going to have the wildlife, and we can't do that. We have bears, we have mountain lions, we have cougars, and Sue Ullman has numerous videos and pictures of what we actually do have. We can't disrupt that. We can't disrupt the water. We can't jeopardize their food. One thing else that I would like to say is it's rural in our area. It doesn't belong in rural. I've developed RV storages, and this isn't right. No commercial or RV storages with propanes should be next to residential, and that affects our property line. And it also ignores our neighbors' easements. There are easements, and it's being ignored. I would appreciate if you would pay attention and understand, not pay attention, but understand what our concerns are. I thank you very much at this point for hearing us, because it's impacting a lot, just not for this RV storage, but for the development in this area. More population means we don't even have adequate infrastructure. How can you develop if you don't have the infrastructure? Thank you very much for your time.
Brian White, followed by Sue Oldham.
Good evening. My name is Brian White. I live at 350 Hirsch Road, Verdi. Excuse me. One of my first concerns is the hours of operation. They're requesting extended operation hours, turning that place into 24-hour access. Yeah, I live 500 feet away from it, but yeah, I think normal business hours, 9 to 5, 6. I believe normal for you guys is 6 to 11. Anything past that, I just think is ridiculous. There's no need for somebody to get in their motorhome at 2 or 3 in the morning. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I do own a motorhome, so just to make that clear. Also, I feel Megan's property has just been lightly brushed over tonight. She is very close in proximity to the property. Her wells, one of them, I didn't go out and measure it, but I'm gonna say it's within 100 feet of one of the retention ponds that they're looking to put in. And if those are not maintained, is her well gonna get contaminated? Is that gonna be a problem? I haven't heard anybody from the developer say, as far as property inspections, how often will somebody from this company, because it is an unmanned site, is anybody gonna ever come out and follow up, or they're just gonna wait for somebody to complain like us? One of my other thoughts was, this is basically the gateway to the city. So right when you enter the city, this is what we're gonna start seeing is mini storage complexes and stuff like that. I feel we should make it more inviting, and of course, until something's done with the off-ramp, because the speed is very fast. I mean, we live there, we're used to it, we know. You see somebody coming off that freeway, you just sit and wait. Do not attempt to pull out. There was a death out that way, not 2 months ago, I believe, fatality. Again, getting back to Megan's easement runs right through this place. And I just feel that's the one easement that hasn't been mentioned. And as Dave had mentioned, with the accident that they had, that was the only way we could get in and out of our property was through Megan's easement. I don't think it's been mentioned hardly at all tonight, just briefly brushed over. And I just feel that needs to be addressed. When we built our houses, we had to put engineered leach fields in. We had to stay X amount of feet away from the wells, X amount of feet away from the river. And I feel this isn't being done or considered. I apologize. Thank you for your time.
Sue Oldham, followed by Ryan Ravenel.
For the record, my name's Sue Oldham. I'm passing out a more organized list of the homeowners' concerns, bullet points of different issues. I'll try not to hit all of them because I know you've got them and you can go through them. I think everybody in our area all agree that that freeway off-ramp needs to be improved. It's limited because of the space and because of the drop-off if you go farther up the way, and it's dangerous. There's unexpected speeds. People go too fast. The overpass is abrupt, unexpected, and narrow. But this project is actually going to make the problem worse. How do we actually properly plan for the freeway when this plan is asking the Department of Transportation to give up a very substantial drainage easement right on the front of our property that's about probably 20 feet wide? The easement for that is in this package, and I think they're going to need that easement in order to actually fix this freeway exit correctly. The other thing is we're attracting large RVs and trucks and trailer rigs into this area where it's narrow. The RVs can't stop. They'll end up going on the freeway backwards. All the problems people have mentioned. The project will affect water quality in the Truckee River. I've worked on those issues for years for the city of Reno, and honestly, to have a retention basin on the bank of the Truckee River is just absolutely bizarre to me, that little one up in the corner on right here. If there's no reason for it there, if all of the water is going to flow the other way, and certainly we don't want that water to go down the bank into the Truckee River. The retention basins also are right near two of the wells. One of the wells.
Can you swing the microphone over with you when you do that? It moves with you.
Excuse me. One of the wells is right in here, the one that Brian was talking about. But the other one that's even more significant is right up here, and that well is just a couple of feet from the retention basin, which makes no sense. When I put in a septic tank, I had to make it 75 feet from my well, and I don't understand how you can put a retention basin right next to a well. I don't think the Washoe County has looked at this issue. The wells will be affected by the runoff. I believe that there is so much runoff. Those are 10-foot deep basins that I've noted on the map here. There's so much runoff that that runoff will just blow away. After they fill those basins, that runoff is just going to blow away the water in the retention basin. Mature trees are marked on here. The ones that the developer marked are circled. The other ones are not. The easements are good. They date back to the 1870s. You can see the packed out easement that's been there for 150 years. Other issues, if you look at our number 9, those are the things that we want in order to make this project work properly. It includes security cameras, bear-proof cans, bathroom on site, sand and oil separator, the retention basin on the bluff eliminated, provision for hazardous materials, sprinkler system that automatically provides, it can't be water, but fire gel or some non-toxic chemical, access lanes so that vehicles can stop before they cross over and look for oncoming traffic.
Sue, I'm going to have you wrap it up, please.
Okay, lighting, not a 24-hour operation, and it seems like the power line needs to be undergrounded along the edge of the property here. Because if that power line's gone, none of us will have power to fight the fire, nor will the fire department have power for their pump.
Ryan Ravenel, followed by Megan Evans.
Hi, I'm Ryan Ravenel, and I'd like to voice support for this project, namely because I am a camper owner in the Northwest Reno area, and there is a definite lack of availability of storage facilities up there. So right now, currently, our camper is being stored at a lot that's very far north of Reno, Stead. 85% of our trips are probably on I-80 West to go access Boca and some of those other reservoirs that were mentioned earlier. And right now, we're having to go, 25 minutes north of where we live to get our camper and get ready. Whereas if it was located right there on I-80, I think the location makes a lot of sense for a lot of travelers, a lot of people that enjoy the outdoors right there. From the fire perspective, I guess I've heard a lot of people raise that issue, but it seems to me, I'm not super familiar with the area, but I do know there is that large RV park right across the road. So I fail to see how propane tanks stored right across the road present a bigger fire hazard than propane tanks stored at the RV storage facility. So I'm in support of it. I love the location. It's a place that I would like to put my camper, and that's it. Thanks.
Megan Evans, followed by Aaron Evans.
Thought I'd put that back up there.
Rotate it.
Thank you. Hi, sorry. I'm Megan Evans, so I'm the owner, along with my husband Aaron, of the property on both sides here. So let me get my bearings over here as well as over here. No. Oh, sorry. Over here and over here. So we have quite a few concerns that I think you've heard a lot of them, so I don't want to rehash too much. Some of the big ones are the effect on our right-of-ways to drive through, our easements. One easement, they have given us access. It's a tiny little road where people who live in the home that's marked Evans are going to be expected to go and wait in line behind the trailers, I guess, and boats until they can get to that tiny little road to get to the homes and then come out the other way, possibly behind boats and RVs and things waiting again. And that seems not to be at all appropriate for what our easements were allowing for us. Also, I am not sure that our bi-state propane truck can get through there or any other fire trucks can get back there or anything else. That lot is landlocked. Yes, we own the property next door, but that is not okay to assume that we will always own both properties side by side or the same owner will be there to make a commitment such as this that would then affect that landlocked lot. I think if you guys imagine living in your home and having 24-hour RV storage right next to it that's unmanned. They said that it's 24-hour video surveillance. My understanding is there is not someone watching those videos 24 hours. They can go back after something's gone wrong and check them, but the problem's gonna occur and it's gonna be later when it's too late before anyone finds out what's going on. And that's really concerning. That means it could affect our water. It could affect the safety of the folks living out there. It could affect fire, if a fire starts and it takes a long time to even discover it. Sorry, let me look at my notes. He talked about it being a good in and out drop off place, so you just go pick up your stuff, head out to Stampede, go do whatever, come back and drop it off. There's nowhere there where you can dump, spray down your boat, take out, you know, the water, all the things that we all do with RVs and boats. You can't do that there. So I'm not sure I understand the idea that you can just come in, dump your stuff, and or pick it up and leave without doing some major work there that's going to cause pollutants to be rinsed off boats and RVs and be going into that little area they've got there. My understanding is if no one's there, they're gonna do whatever they want. People are gonna dump, people are gonna not have facilities to use, so they'll just do that there. People are going to leave trash for the bears. I could tell you all about the family of bears that live out there last year that were in my apple tree. We have a lot going on out there, and this kind of facility is not conducive and not safe. Thank you.
Aaron Evans, followed by Aaron Stiber.
Good evening, Aaron Evans for the record. That was my wife, Megan. We own the two adjoining lots, both to the north. Yes, we know they're community commercial. The house that's on this lot was built in 1940. This house right here was built in 1997. This well, I believe, is the original well. This is kind of the interpretation of that basin that they're planning. I think from their presentation, the setback off the property line looked to be less than maybe 15 feet. Our well is similar to that, so I'm concerned that it's within this 25-foot range that, with a preliminary phone call to the health department, that there may be some, you know, concerns, right, with this retention basin next to our well.
Can you pull the microphone over?
Sorry.
with you? Thanks.
So concerns with that retention basin and its proximity to our well. The 14 average daily trips is an average, right? How many trips are there going to be in November, December, January, February, March? None, very few. So those are going to get concentrated into those busy 6 months. May, June, July, August, September, maybe part of October. So that 14 daily trips is probably more like 28 daily trips, right, in the peak seasons. Now imagine Memorial Day, Labor Day, July 4th. Any weekend during our Washoe County School District shortened summer, people are going to be out there getting their boats and everything. So imagine Memorial Day when everybody's going to try to get their RVs and boats, and you live in this house, and you're trying to, you have to, you know, turn into the RV thing, then turn here, and then turn here. What are you going to do on that Friday night when everybody's trying to get out of town? Yes, we have another road that they can access, but like my wife said, we may not always own that property. That may not always be the case, and the developer can't assume how we're going to use our own property. So that 14 average daily trips is going to be less than that in the winter months, I would be safe to say. But in the summer months, especially in those peak weekends, are going to go through the roof. And then that's going to just compound all those safety concerns that everybody's brought out. For those that have visited the site, if you see traffic coming off there, you know people speed. Everybody speeds. We know it's marked 35, but nobody cares. And if you can imagine somebody having to make a left-hand turn into this property, towing an RV or a boat, and they don't judge the speed that somebody's coming off that highway properly, it's going to be catastrophic. Same when they're exiting. You know, you've got a big trailer and they're trying to come out. If they don't gauge the speed of that traffic coming off of 80, there's going to be a catastrophic accident there. And the project doesn't fit. I understand this is community commercial. I understand with the special use permits it is allowed, but right here, this is basically where the gate access is going to be to that property. There's no bathrooms. What are people going to do if they have to go to the bathroom? Oh, look, that good crop of trees that he said that he's going to save, it's down in a little depression. Guess what? People are going to go down there to use the bathroom because there's no bathroom facilities on site here. So there's a lot of concerns that we have with this. It's not appropriate for this spot. Thank you for your time.
Apparently, we need to increase the size of our monitor to be able to, that would be. Aaron Stiber, followed by Christine Hummel.
Good evening. My name is Erin Stieber. My boyfriend and I currently drive to Stead to get our trailer, and there's no trailer storage in Reno. Everything's full. This is a great location. It's right off the right off the freeway, right by a gas station, and I'm in support of this project being built. I think it would make a lot of people happy. Thank you.
Christine Hummel, followed by Jack Guzman.
Hello, I'm Christine Hummel, and I am totally in favor of this project. I think Reno is growing. I think there's a need for this in the community. I live in a townhome development where I'm not allowed to keep my trailer, so I have to look other places to find for storage. Most of the places that I've researched are old or they need updating or something like that. And I really appreciate the fact that this is a low-impact development, as we were all concerned about the air quality, et cetera. The location is great. I'm hoping that you will really take into consideration the pros that people have mentioned tonight, because I think it would be a great benefit for the community of Reno. So thank you so much.
Jack Guzman, followed by Brian Elder.
Yes, my name's Jack Guzman. I reside at 190 Hirsch, which is one of the property owners adjacent to this project. A lot of the concerns that I have been voiced before. I'll reiterate some of them. Some of the big ones are, this is a 24-hour unmanned or an unsupervised unit. We're saying we have monitors that are monitored 24 hours a day. That's not going to happen. After an event happens, then we're going to find out what the cause was or who did what. This particular site has no amenities to accommodate its consumers, the people that are coming in. There's no trailer dump. If you go off-site and you have to empty your facility, what are you going to do? You're expected to go back into this facility and leave a holding tank for 2 or 3 months? That's not going to happen. They're going to look for, since this is an unsupervised one, a place to exit those tanks. And I'm afraid that we're going to have a problem with that on site. There is no controls of any contaminants from the standpoint of anybody. Suppose you had an RV there and you wanted to do a little work on it. Who's going to stop you from doing that? You want to drain your oil. You want to, dispose of the empty oil cans or filters or any of those. There's no refuge on site. There's no accommodation for any of that. And I think that any of these projects that go should have those accommodations, because they're guests that they have and their customers that they have. They need to accommodate those things all in good business form. And also, I don't know whether we're going forward with this and give this some type of approval or not this evening. Hopefully, with our good neighbors and the Megans that are trying to define their right on their easements, that they don't have to get into a litigation type of situation because we've moved so far forward. I think some of these issues can be addressed before the approval process, and some of our concerns hopefully will present the best project going forward for the community and all of us at large. And I thank you for your time.
Brian Elder, followed by Irvi Sanchez.
Good evening, Brian Elder for the record. I just wanted to come and voice my support for the project. Bought a boat a couple years ago. And this location, I usually go about 90% of the time to Boca or Stampede. It's got the gas station right there across the street, so looks like the design was really well done. And yeah, I think it's a good project, and a lot of people will get a lot of good use out of it. So thank you.
Irvi Sanchez.
Hello. Hello, my name is Irvi Sanchez. I'm not a really talkative person, but I think this is a great project. I do a lot of camping and boating, and it's just so convenient. It's off the freeway. I'm an RV guy, so whenever I park my stuff, turn the propane off, disconnect the batteries, I think it'll be safe. I just hate asking for favors, and it's like leaving my stuff outside of my house. People are always messing with it. I think it's a great idea. We need this storage facility in Verdi, since I do a lot of my camping up in Boca and Stampede. So I'm just think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few more forms here that have indicated they do not wish to make a statement. I'll verify that. Kathleen Smith does not wish to make a statement, is in opposition. Please don't let them pave paradise and put up a parking lot. Okay, Jimmy Buffett reference, I like that. Fire egress, water pollution. Pam McNeil does not wish to make a statement, is in opposition. And Lynn Guzman does not wish to make a statement, in opposition. Ignores adjacent homeowners' easement, deeds ingress and egress dangers created by length of vehicles, fire protection, river contaminants, and drainage. Michelle, do we have any additional requests to speak forms on this item?
No, I do not.
Anyone else wishing to make public comment on this item? Just make sure you see Michelle when you're finished. Oh, look at that.
Hi there. Just wanted to make a couple of statements. Carly Borchard for the record. I do appreciate we need some storage out in Verdi, and I know that multiple properties are looking to do so. So I know eventually we will have a space out here within the commercial districts that we have. I would just really want to encourage and support some changes to what they've already done. And it's amazing that the process has worked. You know, they were able to come to the NAB, get constructive feedback, and deal with the neighbors and make some viable changes here. I think that encouraging, I did mention it at NAB, and I would love if he wouldn't mind maybe the developer to explain again an egress, you know, having a separate lane so that as people are coming off the freeway, which as you've heard tonight and me having driven this my whole life, it is fact. People come off that freeway going freeway speeds. So as long as there's a lane that they can merge off into, I think that would be beneficial. I have expressed my concerns, and I'm going to again tonight, that overpass. There's two ways that you can get onto the freeway. It looks like an ideal situation to most people that don't know the area. Unfortunately, there's two ways to get back on the freeway. If you're gonna go east, which most people are not, it's a hairpin turn onto the freeway. So if you've got a motorhome or an RV or a boat, it's very hairy. It's actually pretty hairy just with my own vehicle, and I have a Tahoe, so it's scary. They have extended that lane. That's wonderful, but I am concerned about people not knowing the area, not being able to turn around. So with those incorporations, I think that could really benefit. And then, you know, there's not much that can be done with that overpass road that goes the most of these people, I assume, and we've heard them tonight, you know, 85, 90% of their trips is going into California. So going back west, they have to go over a very small, way outdated overpass that is extremely hazardous as it is now with large trucks. And then again, we have a lot of issues with directionals, people not really knowing where to go, how to go. So I would really encourage some signage there, some clear, concise signage, which I have to admit gets knocked over constantly because of missing that exit or ramp. And then, you know, that the on-ramp going west isn't that bad, but that one intersection I think really needs some focus as well as a secondary pull-off spot. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make public comment this evening? Okay, with that, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Who'd like to get us started? Commissioner Marshall.
Big yellow taxi, Joni Mitchell, paved paradise, put up a parking lot.
Oh, you're right. It's been a long day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out as the very first comment. Thank you.
I have for staff, for Brooke. Could you address the question about open storage and
how we're looking at this? So we look as our RV and boat storage falls into our mini warehouse storage area. A lot of times we'll see those associated with a mini warehouse, so those being a building where they're storing, personal goods, and then you'll have RV or boat storage outside of this. This does not have the building component. There's no building associated with this. And so it still is a mini warehouse. It's basically a storage yard for RVs and boats that's going to be canopy covered and screened.
So what's the difference between that and what?
Outdoor storage is usually associated with an industrial use. We'll often see that. It has different rules as far as screening, how it's used. It usually will be associated with another use. We often don't see outdoor storage as a standalone use. It's usually an accessory use to exist or industrial or other sort of use of that nature.
Okay, why is it a special use as opposed to an allowed use?
So that goes within that community commercial zoning through our allowed or our allowed uses. It comes under a special use permit. Why that was, through the code, why they decided that, as the impacts are that or not, or the appropriateness, that's not for me to decide, or not a policy. I am aware of how that came about, but it is within our code that it does require a special use permit.
Okay, would it be possible, I don't know if this is a question for you or for fire, but is there some sort of fire suppression that could be put in an open canopy design?
I think fire would be best to address that.
So for the record, Trey Palmer, Fire Marshal, and no. Basically, you could put in a dry system and a canopy, but there's nothing within the code that requires it. The main difference here is because you're not building a building, there's no structure that you need to protect. Everything is kind of like, we're looking at this kind of like you have outdoor parking, you have an outdoor parking lot. If you have a fire in one vehicle, if there's no containment, that fire is going to go upward and outward. It's going to ventilate up and out. So it's going to be more or less contained mostly to that single car. If you're in a building, you're going to contain that heat. The fire's going to go up, out. Once it hits the ceiling, it's going to bank down, 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 down until you have radiant heat all throughout the building. So then everything else catches really quick. And so if it's enclosed, then yes, we have to protect everything in the building. This is not enclosed. So there's nothing in the fire code that says you have to protect it.
I can't remember the reference where it was, but I was either reading or watching something just about the ignition coming off of embers as opposed to adjacent heat. And that's what really causing, at least from forest fire perspective.
So wildland fires, absolutely. So you do have an ember problem, especially when you have high winds. And so that is a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Trey, while you're up there, one more, get you while you're there. Came up a few times about access on Orange Post Road.
Yes.
And I guess what's your opinion on that, and how is it adequately wide for getting to the houses on Hirsch Road as well as the backside of that building? How would you address the comments that came up there?
So the residents are right in the sense that currently Orange Post Road is too narrow. Currently it's 12 feet, I think, if I remember right, or around that width. Currently there's Rick, I think it's a 25-foot easement wide that goes to that road, but only a portion of it is paved. To match today's fire code, that road should be 20 feet minimum.
And should that be the case regardless of this development or not, or how would you address that?
So it depends on the responsibility. So right now, the housing development is in the county. So ultimately, it's the county's, it falls into the county to protect. If somebody was going to build a new house, theoretically, that's when the new code requirements kick in. So whenever we have new construction or new development, wherever that building is being served, that's typically when we go in and enforce the expansion of a road, for example. So because of this particular project, that road is not entering into the facility. It doesn't necessarily fall under this project for that facility, but it does affect the residents below. So in a nutshell, yes, that road should be 20 feet minimum width. Anybody else?
I'll get back to you, Commissioner Marshall. Any other questions for Chief White's here? Fire Marshal? Okay. Don't go too far. We could call you back.
Oh, okay.
I have a quick
See?
Okay.
See?
It looks like there's an RV storage just east, an existing one of the proposed location.
Yes, on the Gold Ranch side?
Yeah.
Yes.
Northeast, Crystal Park Storage.
It's a park where people vacation.
No.
Well, this is
called
a question here, so.
I'm sorry, this is
I'll
called
ask the
Crystal
audience.
Park Storage, and
Okay,
it's
yes.
advertised as storage, an RV storage. It's not covered. It looks like there's dirt roads there. Has there been, to your knowledge, a lot of fires or challenges with that area?
No. And so what I'll tell you with units, typically where we have problems with fires and trailers and boats, well, typically it's travel trailers. Usually there's a human component to where people are cooking in it, they're using it. That's where we typically have fires. When a trailer is stored, when things are disconnected and it's stored and people are not living in that trailer, we tend not to have problems. Fires, not to say they don't happen, but it's not common. Typically, again, it's the human factor of people using that trailer that causes these fires.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I think we're good for now.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I thought of a question.
I can do this all night for you if you want.
Getting my exercise.
Sorry, Trey.
No problem.
The proposed storage tank, how does the City of Reno Fire verify that that tank contains an adequate amount of water? Is that something you inspect?
Yeah, so what we use is a national standard. So NFPA 1142 is a national standard for a project like this, where you're building in a rural area that has no water. And the county, Washoe County, uses it quite a bit because of how they're situated. Carson City uses it, Fallon, Fernley, they've used it. We typically don't use it. As a matter of fact, this is really the only second time that we would utilize it. But the 2018 International Fire Code, which is what the city adopted, allows us to use NFPA 1142 just for this condition. And it's the standards that, it's a whole calculation. A calculation that puts together what's the use, how big is the building, where's the exposures. There's a lot of factors. I can't go into all of them, but that national standard calculates all those components. And through those calculations, it's compiled to tell you or tell the fire department these are adequate water supplies of what you need. And the preliminary look of what was submitted does match 1142. We would take a bigger look at it, obviously, when the final submittal is done, but the 16,000 gallon tank does match, appears to match what 1142 requires.
And that's based on the use that's being proposed. So
Correct. So in other words, if this was a multifamily development, we couldn't use it. If it was storing, if it was a manufacturing or processing plant, you can't use 1142. Anything where there's a special fire hazard or more than an ordinary hazardous component, this 1142 system could not be used. And that's the reason why it's open. That if it was a building, then you're taking all of that, putting it into one contained building, that you cannot use 1142 for. But if it's an open storage area, like it is being proposed now, then it can be used.
And so the fire department doesn't consider the vehicles or whatever is going to be stored there. There's no hazardous component that's a concern.
Well, there's always a hazard to anything that can burn. But under 1142, it defines this use as a low hazard. And so we don't necessarily decide the use on our own. We use a national standard. There's various examples throughout 1142 which classifies your hazard between 3 and 8, I think, or 3 and 7. And so through those samples, that plugs into a calculation, but that's specifically listed in the national standard. So in that national standard, it suggests this use or shows this use as being a low hazard facility.
So to go back to Commissioner Marshall's question and your response, which I thought was very well articulated with the containment of the fire in a structure versus an open structure, if there is a scenario like a high wind event where there is even a small fire and it spreads to adjacent uses, what does that scenario look like? You have the tank there with that fire, but there was the assertion made by the applicant in the presentation that, this is essentially a source of water for the surrounding area, but that doesn't really sound like that's necessarily the case. So how do you respond to a fire that's kind of spread outside of the bounds? What's your source of water to protect adjacent areas?
Yeah, so currently there's no water out there right now for protection. We don't have any hydrants and we don't have a water supply. So what we would utilize in that sense, we would just call for help with the county to access their tenders. And the tender trucks, they contain about 2,500 gallons of water. Our engines have 750 gallons on them, which utilizing a 2.5-inch hose lasts for about 5 minutes. Using an 1.75-inch line, a little bit more. But to answer your question, we do the best we can with what we have. But right now, I can tell you there is no water out there. And so we would be utilizing mobile resources, bringing the water in. If we had a water tank out there such as this that holds approximately 6 tenders worth of water, that would be better than what we have now.
Where does the Gold Ranch casino across the street, what's their situation?
So Gold Ranch has their own water system. They have their own water supply. They have a big tank that supplies the casino and the RV park. So they have their own water. It's a private water supply.
Okay. Last question, I promise.
No, that's fine.
Where's the closest, you mentioned the tender and the county tender. Does that tender reside at the station that's over there on?
So that I don't know.
Mogul?
So we don't control the county station. So and the rigs move depending on different situations. So we never know at any one time where the tenders are going to be in the county. We're actually looking at trying to buy one for the city of Reno. But again, we don't have one now. So we can't really count on tenders, where they're going to be and how close they're going to be.
Okay. Really appreciate the time and you being here.
No problem.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
I think you're
Thank
good. All right, I'm going to send it back to Commissioner Marshall. He's in the middle of his line of questioning.
Brooke? I think I heard you talk about pre-treatment into the retention basin.
Correct, through our Public Works Design Manual, Title 18, those protections. Mike Michelle, our our engineering manager is here. He could probably speak more technically and more thorough on that.
Mike Michelle, engineering manager.
Could you just describe what's going to be going into that detention basin and, particularly in light of a not unreasonable expectation of a quite array of substances that might be present on the on the site?
The on-site flow will be captured in an on-site storm drain system, and there are inlets that capture that water. In those inlets, in our standard design manual, we have interceptors that are already pre-designed and pre-packaged in those catch basins. So gets cleaned up in that regard. It flows to the basins. They are open basins that have vegetation that does clean it up a bit. I do understand that the basins will not discharge, so there's nothing that's going to be leaving the basins. So they are open and there's vegetation, and that helps clean stuff up too.
Well, but it'll be most likely, we're anticipating that, particularly since it's going to be all based on rain flow and stormwater, that there's going to be some water perking into the groundwater.
Water will perk in to the adjoining soil, and it really has to, because we want these basins dry within 7 days.
You mentioned the interceptors. What do they filter out?
They'll filter out grease, sediment,
So sand, oil separators, basically?
sand, oil separators.
Everything else, any sort of biological or anything else? is
Biological
filtered?
stuff they don't pick up.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if this is for the applicant or for Brooke, but could you address a lot of the comments about where people are going to dump their sanitary systems in the RVs and heads in their boats, and how do you see that working out? Since there's no facilities on site.
Yeah, for the record, Dave Snellgrove with CFA. There are dump stations around across the way. I believe that the dump station at the RV park at Gold Ranch probably be your nearest. My wife and I had an RV. We had a side yard. We stored it at home. There are gas stations that do have them. The Shell station, Chevron station, what it used to be, up Mount Rose Highway. That had a dump station. I don't know if they have that one reopened. We get rid of our trailer as our kids got older. But there are dump stations around that can take effluent. And I'd imagine coming on, and I haven't checked any of these, but some of the stations up around the Truckee, or I don't know if the Glenshire area, or is it Glenshire?
So you're anticipating.
Hirschdale.
Yeah, you're anticipating that your customers will.
No, and
dump
that's part of
off-site.
it. Is that in their lease agreement, they'll have certain rules that they have to abide by. One of them is, we don't have a dump station here. If you want your tank cleaned, you're going to have to dump it prior. That's what we knew as a RV owner storing it at our house. We had to dump it somewhere else. We can't put it into a tank and put it in the sewer system. We have to find an appropriate place to do that. Not every boat and RV, mini storage with boat and RV has a dump station with it. People will choose what they want. I think there is a boat and RV storage if you go due north underneath the freeway on-ramp that's down below grade from the freeway quite a bit. I don't believe that one has one. There are a lot that do not have them. And when you lease in a place, you know that going into it.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marshall. Additional questions? Commissioner Gower.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Brooke about the traffic concerns, and we have findings related to that the project provides or mitigates traffic concerns. It's unfortunate that NDOT can't be here to talk through these a little bit since it's there right away. But from your perspective and, based on, I'm sure you've taken that exit there, exit 2, we had some testimony tonight with some of the traffic speeds. Can you just react to that a little bit with the concern? And as I understand it, there are 2 movements that are of concern. There's the one coming off of the freeway. If you have a slow vehicle making a right-hand turn into the property with the potential for a vehicle being behind it. And then you have another scenario with a vehicle coming sort of southwest on the access road, making a left turn into the property. And that's the bigger concern for me, and maybe the less popular movement, but the bigger concern, impacting a driver coming off of the freeway.
Certainly. So through this process, staff, our staff engineer who's working on this project, and also the applicant has worked with NDOT pretty extensively and their engineers for what design would be appropriate for that access to the site. They need to be provided access off that site, and what would be the most appropriate access for that. With that, I believe it's what is the NDOT? The Type 5 approach through NDOT is what NDOT has recommended in that. That provides a little bit of turn-off space there, wider turn in and outs there to accommodate those larger vehicles. Additionally, what we're seeing through NDOT comments and staff comments is that we have, as was shown in the diagram, there's stacking that occurs through that. And so not only do we have one lane of stacking, we actually have 2 lanes of stacking, so you can bypass through that particular organization. That will limit that sort of traffic or backup. That was sort of through NDOT suggestions. And we're also seeing that right turn out movement, so we're not limiting there. So we're trying to limit those movements as much as possible. So through that and working through that, what's initially been proposed, NDOT has felt comfortable with that. Obviously, we'll have to go to their permitting, and if this does get approved, we'll have to meet all of their requirements as far as access to that. I do understand that cars are moving or have the ability to move quite quickly down that road because of how it's signed or how it feels. That road is posted, as I stated, at 35 miles an hour. It is a legal requirement to be 35 miles an hour at the point of that project. And so I understand that always doesn't happen, but that is something that is someone moving past breaking the law and not obeying traffic signs and signals.
And I guess that's a concern, and we kind of talked about this last week with the code requirements and being within the code, and then there's sort of the reality. And I'm glad you mentioned that third movement of vehicles pulling out of the property, making that right-hand turn, because I think that is a concern too, especially coming back onto the freeway and going westbound.
If you've been out there, what happens is that lane actually tapers to nothing.
Right.
We don't have control of any ability to have a vehicle turn around there. So that was staff, and also NDOT was very supportive that is a controlled movement out to the right only on that.
And I guess my concern is that because the design of that roadway is such that you've got vehicles coming off that freeway, even if they're going the speed limit at 65 miles an hour, which nobody does on that stretch of the freeway, coming off of that roadway, I mean, those distances are short. And are we as a city, we've got the 35 mile an hour sign posted, but are we as a city doing our part with the design of the project to mitigate what we know is the reality that's going on out there, not just that what we're hoping people are going to go 35 miles an hour?
Certainly, sir. I mean, in our engineering from the beginning, we've had concerns about access just because of that. But legally, they need to be provided access to their site. So there is a way to do that with deferring to NDOT and those speeds and that. For us, that's using their traffic engineers to determine what is it appropriate. City staff was comfortable with that support and guidance from them. And then our suggestions as far as stacking, right turn movements over and other things like that to limit that. Once again, we're also seeing obviously we'll see peak times and other times. We're seeing 14 vehicles a day, minimal. As you look down, there is a clear vision of sight. We're not seeing turns or anything like that. There is a long vision of sight along when you're making a turn in too. You can see that full quarter mile of someone coming off there too. And so, yes, there is a danger. There is an inherent danger of turning in that as it's built. But with working through the engineers and that, they feel that they can design access to that property, which is their legal right, that meets safety requirements through posting. There may be additional striping, there may be additional posting. They have limited that no parking will be allowed along that exit too. They could come in and post if they wanted. That property is under control of NDOT though, and so the city, we can work with them, but we cannot tell how they're going to design that project.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have another question for Brooke. It's a different subject, so I wanted to just turn it back to you if others had comments on or questions on traffic.
I think we're kind of bouncing around enough that go ahead and ask the next question that you have.
Okay, thank you. Brooke, the other question I have is related to zoning. This area is community commercial, but this appears to be the only really commercial use that's being considered out here. Can you give me a little bit of the history of why this area is community commercial if we've got so much residential in the area?
I believe, so if we look directly across the street, that's actually zoned mixed use, which is one of our higher intensity sort of commercial developments. I think we're looking at that gateway and at one time, the history, understanding that perhaps that was the appropriate commercial area to come in off that freeway and have those events. So, that is the zoning that I had to work with and understand. The history of why that is there, it's hard for me to know what policies were in place or what projects at the time that developed that. But as a planner, I'm faced with the zoning that I'm given.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners, additional questions? Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brooke, with everything wrong that I see with this development or proposed development, why don't we just go take away the 11 to 6 and let them build?
So when we looked at those extended hours, when we're looking at those 14 vehicle trips a day, we felt for the operations and that is a contained site, that residential adjacency that we'd be worried about, though we do have that residential directly adjacent, residents directly adjacent, that the overall light, noise impacts, things that we would normally look at in a 24-hour operation are really quite minimal. And so for them to offer us the ability for their clients, if they got broke down or something and they have to pull in at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're able to dump off their RV and go home at that point. So we kind of looked at, or if someone wants to pick up at 5 o'clock in the morning because they're meeting someone else, we're not anticipating that it's going to be going 24 hours a day. We really, with the use that's there, we're really looking at those unique situations where someone's coming an hour or two early or has, was not able to get home till later. And so we did not see, staff's analysis of this did not see really any more impact noise-wise with I-80 there. That's the ambient noise from I-80 is going to block out anything we're going to hear, and then seeing with a solid CMU wall will block out also additional sound and light once they're in the facility. And so staff did not feel that there was really anything that warranted that they are through an SUP allowed to ask for those, and we felt that it was a situation that was appropriate to allow that.
So even though we have, let's hypothetically say you're going to have 1 or 2 units or 2 unit parking places where someone comes in at 11:05, decides they're going to take their RV up to Boca, which is kind of crazy anyway, but is it really worth that 1 or 2 vehicles a night to get them out of that area to go through this?
Once again, we're looking, I can't say if it's worth it or not. That's the model that they've proposed. They propose to go 24 hours a day. They feel that it provides a service to their customers. My job was to look at, with that request, are there impacts that are not mitigated by allowing that? Staff's analysis came up that we felt that any sort of noise, light, those things that we would be associated with 24 hours of that use were mitigated. So I can't, it was the request that was given by the applicant, and we looked at it as that request.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Applicant's representative, please.
Dave Selmgrove for the record.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the 40-foot distance or maybe 50-foot distance from the well to the retention pond. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, as Mr. Michelle said, we'll have catch basins. That'll take the water over. You have filtration that goes in. When you've got a well, you do want to recharge your aquifer. If there is, I'm unaware of any distance separation to a retention or detention pond. If there is, we've got more, I think that overhead's still on. Let me put the site plan up. I've got it. There. Okay, so if you look,
Ma'am, I'm sorry, we'll let the applicant speak.
oh, it doesn't work on this. I have to use my fingers. No, that's okay. I just have to do this upside down. Their well is right here. And if that needs to be farther away, I actually had something on my phone that I was looking at, but it was distance from septic and leach field to wells and property lines and all that. So I didn't have anything from a well to something that basically infiltrates water, which is what we're going towards. If there's a requirement for that, we've got additional area that we can work with to pull that away and reconfigure it. We definitely want to keep the trees there. I think Brooke alluded to it, and part of it is when you go into final design, everything doesn't remain exactly like this, but we have to be in substantial conformance. If there is a concern or issue with that the Washoe County Health Department has, and I don't believe there is, to a retention basin to a well, but if there is, we can find a place that's already in the low part of this site. I think everyone's pointed out that's where the trough is that we can work with.
Last week, we looked at a project, and I asked about percolation. If you've got this designed to where it's going to go out, or how are you so sure it's going to perk there?
The area that we're in, a lot of areas of town don't perk very well. We've got some bad soils. This being up in the Sierra Range, you're going to have a lot of decomposed granite. You're going to have a lot of different types of soil that are going to help water perk in faster. If we find a horrible percolation rate, you can grant an approval to the project, and if there's a condition of approval in there that we can't end up meeting, the project doesn't go forward. The project ends up not being built, or there has to be some engineered solution, or potentially it might need to come back. You try and go through these things with a reasonable level of information that you collect without breaking the bank. You don't want to spend $250,000 for a solid maybe. That's not in anyone's interest on the development end. We look at housing costs going up and up and up. The more that you have to put in early, and you've got a real strong maybe walking in here, it's a challenge. So we try and do these things with the best available information. We know generally what the soil should be up here. A geotechnical report will have to be done with this, and a percolation test to prove out that we can perk at the rates necessary to meet the policy requirements for the city of Reno and the district health department.
How many mature trees do you anticipate losing on this property?
We've anticipated, I think there were 13 or 14. I know the neighbors counted up something different. I've been out to the site, different heights, different levels of trees. Some are more deciduous shrubby, some are taller trees. I think we stuck to the taller trees. We're probably going to be saving about 25 in this area. Got another one here. We got 4 along Orange Post Road, and we've got 6 up here. So there's 10, 11, and then 30 to 40 plus or minus trees. At this 20 to 25 down here, we didn't go down the Mountain Goat Hill. But I know along those edges, there's probably more than one tree. We did it by an aerial view, and we tried to go very conservatively. So I think 20 to 25 is probably low.
And you coming in with the replacement trees up there with a large caliber tree?
Yeah, we can come in with bigger caliper trees in a lot of these areas. We're trying to plant more naturally up along the frontage. I'll move the mic. Up along the frontage here, and then in these corners, because as mentioned, this is a canopy system, so this side and this side and this side and this side, they wouldn't be screened. What we'll be using is all evergreens to help screen that. If it helps in beautification to put some flowering, whatever trees out there, we certainly can do that. We're working with LA Studio Nevada on the project, and I pointed out we wanted trees along the back to help the view from across the river. The home that's 525 plus or minus feet away. We didn't want them to just look at the back of 6-foot wall and the curtain wall coming down. We wanted to give some break up to that. So around the perimeter of the property, yes, we can plant larger trees. I wouldn't see us planting, 25-foot evergreen at the start, but in the code, there are requirements for larger trees, and I think some of those code requirements keep going up. And Angela's smiling at me that, yes, they are.
One final question. Did you have a NAB meeting last night?
We did.
We don't have any paperwork in front of us as far as NAB comments. Can
We-
you fill us in a little bit?
Those were emailed to you.
Yeah, there were a lot of comments back on lighting. There were comments and questions and concerns on the easement. Everything that you heard tonight was stated last night. We did have a NAB meeting previously in August of 2018, and that's what generated where we are with this and a lot of the positive change that we did make. I know that there was a list, and I'd love to get a copy of that list that was handed out because I know some of the things, but as they were read off, all of those haven't been exposed to us. Maybe they have it in some way, shape, or form, but I haven't seen them concisely. We're happy to work with the neighbors on this. We're happy to find positive solutions for the neighbors up here and also the neighbors on Orange Post Road. Now, neighbors on Orange Post Road, if we widen this out, they still have Hirsch Road that's 12 to 15 feet wide all the way down to their houses. Hirsch Road's 24 feet?
Direct it
All
to
the
us,
way?
please, Dave.
Okay, I'm just asking a question. They said it's 24 feet. I stand corrected. So we'd be happy to work on a wider access with them, but there's got to be some give and take. We are not impacting it, Orange Post Road, with the way we have this proposed right now. That I can tell you. So if they're open to us having an access out, and in the previous site plan, the access we had there was just a gated emergency access that hopefully would have never had to have been used. But they told us, no, that's for our use only. You can't access there. And maybe we misunderstood, and if that was the case, I apologize.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gower, do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to ask for a point of order and ask the applicant's representative not to engage with the public and vice versa. It's really disruptive. Thank you.
Apologize.
Dave, couple of questions. I noticed in looking at the plans and everything that there does appear to be a pretty substantial low point at the current western edge of the property. Actually, even further up, that appears to be, looks like drainage off of the off-ramp. Looks like it's a pretty significantly lower elevation even than what you're showing in your cross-sections. Your cross-sections demonstrate how much lower it is than what your proposed elevation is.
See if they've got a plan for that.
And it appears that whatever is working its way into that from a drainage standpoint, you're proposing to channelize between the front of the building. I guess I'll use the west side of the building onto, and continue it on to the north. So I guess my question is, are you adequately addressing what's coming off of the freeway there? I know not all of that is necessarily drainage, some of it could just be natural, but it seems to be a pretty significant delta with respect to the grading that you're doing and the potential for water to be coming into that area.
Yeah, I talked to our engineers this morning about that and looked at some of the area that's coming across. And we heard last night some more information. We went in August, but we heard some more information in terms of a rough estimation of water going through that. I can only imagine what amount's going through there, but we would need to probably pipe that rather than rechannelize that. That is water that's coming from a different area. It's not water that this site is creating.
And I understand
so we'd
that. I
pass it
understand
through.
that, Dave. And my question is, how are you addressing the fact that there's water coming onto the site that's not yours that would then need to either be sent off the site in the same location that it is?
Right now, the water comes out and comes down this way up into this area. And there was comment last night at the NAB meeting about this area getting full enough that enough water would stand there that it would breach and kind of flood out this area to the
So
north.
the question that I'm going with this, if you're piping it, is any of that water anticipated to be going into the retention basin. So you're separating that. And so then the next question I had, and I heard, and it didn't make sense at the time, and I think it's been clarified, but I thought I heard the discussion in your presentation that the water that was going into the detention basin was what was coming from your landscape area?
Yeah, I'll point out where that is. I want to clarify. That was something that came up at the hearing last night, that there was a thought that this would be going down.
No,
towards the
I'm not asking where it's going. I'm asking where the water that's going into that basin is
It's only
coming
being
from.
collected from back here. All of these canopies will tilt in. They will all come to the center. It would be any additional runoff that comes back here that would typically need to get piped and out in the system. We're trying to retain it back here so we don't have to run a pipe out that would have to continue all the way out to this retention
So
basin.
everything else, all of the canopies, all of the hardscape is being collected per the conversation we had with Mike Michelle into sand oil separators and piped into that retention basin.
Yeah, we'd anticipate that there'd be a catch basin either in here or we could get it over in here with the driveway and then pipe it back. And that would be caught. You'd have the sand oil separator, and then you go in, and as Mr. Michelle said, within your retention basin, you've got grasses and things that do some additional cleanup to that water going into the
So
ground.
is there any existing, and it's an interestingly drained site currently, but what is the surface water in an event doing on this site currently?
Water that's coming from this site, that's emanating
The
from
water,
the site?
yes, so when, water lands on the site in an event, where is it naturally draining to?
It's naturally draining up into this area right here. Unless you hit this bench and this crest, water to the east of that would go
Understood,
down,
and
but
we're
everything
not
from here would
developing
be
there.
coming over kind of into this area, into the
And
low
so
point.
that's combining in some ways with what's coming onto
Yeah.
the site from elsewhere?
Correct.
Okay. Then I'm going to follow up on the question that was over here and even what came from the fire marshal with respect to Orange Post / Hirsch Road. Why do we keep, which one is it? Okay, so it's Orange Post on here. Okay, so Orange Post Road is not a full 20 feet wide through this parcel.
Correct.
What it happens after this parcel is not the discussion point, but there seems to be some thought that you're leaving it alone under this scenario. What is the thinking in terms of your ability to widen that to 20 feet?
Well, we have 35 feet from property line to the back of the first building here. So there's enough room to widen. There's some grading and different things that'll need to be done. There's some slope on the edge, and some of it's a little flatter. I think a 20-foot roadway could easily be accommodated because we're not touching it. And this was one thing, and I know that the neighbors have taken exception to it, and I don't mean for this to come across harsh, but if we don't have any access or benefit from it, it is their maintenance requirement. That's actually in their easement.
I understand the legal requirements for what you have to do there. I'm asking the feasibility. I'm also looking at this, and if I add whatever 6 feet plus or minus, would that impact all 4 of those trees that are shown there?
It impact at least one, maybe 2. It might be all 4. Coming down to the south, you'd have impact on at least 1, if not more of them.
Okay. And then while this is up, just to get a visual on this type 5 work that we're doing, the widening, can you
Let
give
me see
me a
if
plan?
I think I may have accidentally pulled out my site plan. This one shows it a little better. It's the grading plan.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out, the grading plan is probably the worst plan because there's about 18 lines there that have nothing to do with the edge of road.
No, that's Orange Post Road.
So the question that I have on what's the extent, and I can't tell from any of the images, and the landscape plan doesn't appear to show it. What is the extent of this type 5 widening that's being proposed along the west side of the parcel? Does it extend all the way to Orange Post Road, or is it limited just
It does
to the
not.
2 drive entrances that are proposed into the site?
Here, I think this, can you go back to the overhead? Oh, thank you. This is the right way, okay. So this is site plan here. You can see.
Can you bring the
Pull the
microphone
mic
towards
over
you?
if you would, please, Dave.
Sorry about that.
Normally, you don't need a mic, but it happened to need to pick it up this time.
Okay. The right-of-way edge is located right here. So you can see that this island area is farther back from the right-of-way edge, and you can see here a taper coming out. That taper would occur down here. We don't have the line work right here on the, what I'll call the pork chop island, the directional out. That would end up being pulled back, and there'd be a taper as you come down here. You'd have more pavement to pull out on, start to make your transition to come into the site, which is where we have the stacking. Then you go in through the gate, which would be here.
Okay.
So yeah, it does
let's
pull
back-
things out.
Let me back up now, because you touched on my next question. Circulation, it's an entrance only and exit only based on the circulation that you're showing there.
Correct.
Double lane coming in, stop, is that a stop bar?
That would be where your kiosk and you punch your key code in. So that leaves this exit open, and that's the driveway location here, which
Okay,
I believe
so-
is 12 feet, and that accesses the property to the east.
Okay, so, I'm not gonna call Trey up here for this question. 12 feet access through there, meeting the requirement for a fire truck, or does that need to be 20, since it's from one
It's
parcel to the
a
next?
driveway. I do know that.
I understand that,
Yeah.
okay, so.
And if
so
there's a
so the
requirement to
question-
make it
So
wider.
to answer the question then would be where that stop bar is in the key card access, there's no stacking in front of that. The gate's on the other side.
The gate.
But you would have to stop on
Right.
the opposite side of the driveway in order to access that.
That's where you'd either punch your key card or you could have it on the app on your phone and open the gate
Understood,
and go across.
I'm trying to clarify, again, internal vehicular circulation with respect to what you're proposing there. Okay.
In internal fire access circulation, on here
I
we
see
have
that
the
on the
radius
turn,
set.
I see that, that's
Okay.
not a concern. So then the last question, and I finally thought of one for the fire chief, but I'm gonna let him sit over there and ask you. The requirement for the open sides on the canopy, is that part of this idea that you can enclose one side of the building and still have it met, but the moment you enclose two,
You have to have three sides open.
Three
and that was
sides
through
open.
My conversations with Trey when we were working through some of the issues on the initial design.
okay, and I'm not gonna ask him up, but I will ask Brooke, since you're here, is that in you're in agreement with that three sides open in order to meet the fire requirements that we're looking at here?
Correct. Brooke Oswald, Associate Planner for the record, in working with Trey Palmer and the Reno City Fire Department, that was my understanding that three sides opened, it no longer becomes a building, it becomes a structure in that point, and then that fire, how that is considered from a fire perspective changes at that point.
Okay, thank you. And then one last comment, just because I think there was some confusion. The comments from the NAB meeting last night were forwarded to us electronically earlier this afternoon. So most of us acknowledged in our disclosures that we read those. So I just wanted to, that came up during public comment. I just wanted to get that on the record, that those were forwarded to us in their entirety as prior to this meeting. So,
Correct. I requested those by 9:30 or 10 this morning to make sure that I had collected those. They did kind of peter in throughout the day. As they did, I passed those along. Great.
Commissioners, any additional questions? Commissioner Marshall, or excuse me, Commissioner Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, I have a quick question for you. This is just kind of some of the drainage stuff, getting into the weeds of it. Are you a PE?
I am.
What-
Mike Michelle, engineer manager,
What is that?
professional engineer,
Okay.
registered in the state of Nevada and California.
In the stuff that we get from NDOT, this one was signed by Tara Smaltz. She's also a PE.
She is. I know who she is.
So on the letter that they write to us, there is number 9 and number 10 that talks about the drainage information form. If this project moves forward, there's going to be a lot of things that have to be done by a PE and a hydrologist and a full drainage report that will address a lot of the questions that came through tonight.
Correct.
So maybe at this level, they're not going to be addressed 100%, but based on the information that NDOT provided, it will be addressed to satisfaction to meet all the standards, specifications, FEMA.
It will. You know, the bottom line is that this project will be required to obtain an encroachment permit from NDOT. And by saying that, there's a lot of stuff involved in that. And all of that stuff that comes from NDOT comes under the purview of a PE.
Okay, thank you so much.
Commissioners, any additional questions? Okay, discussion? Would like to get us started? Commissioner Gower?
Mr. Chairman, I want to say that I appreciate Commissioner Taylor's comments on the professional engineer information that we get not only from Mike, but from NDOT and the other agencies. I'm looking at Tara's comments from NDOT, and I'm looking at that finding relative to mitigates traffic, and for some reason, I still have concerns about it. And I think it's because that personally, I have gotten off at that exit probably 100 times, and I know that I don't get off at 35 miles an hour. So type 4 or 5 entrance, compatible approach driveway or not, reality is kind of hitting me in the face. All of the other discussion relative to stormwater, to fire, to residential adjacency, to the easements, I'm pretty comfortable on all of those. But those 3 movements of traffic that I talked about with Brooke, and Brooke, I appreciate your responses, but the reality of it is just I'm having a hard time getting past that. And Mr. Chairman, that's relative to finding 4, I believe, in our packet, that it adequately mitigates traffic concerns. D. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gower. Additional comments?
So Commissioner
Commissioner
Taylor, in response to that, if you were doing 35 miles per hour, would you feel more comfortable with it?
Well, and that's the thing, Commissioner Taylor. I would. If I knew that cars were coming off of there at 35 miles an hour, if there was a cop out there with, a gun 24/7 monitoring traffic, I'd feel great. But there's not.
But there's not everywhere. There's a lot of places like that. I don't think that we can ask a developer or an applicant to come through and be responsible for monitoring ramps when there's a posted speed limit. It's against the law. Somebody's breaking the law to create an uncomfortable situation.
Commissioner Taylor, I'm not saying that I'm putting the onus on the applicant to do anything about it. I'm saying that I'm seeing a project coming in that's going to put a certain type of traffic onto a roadway. And as the city of Reno, we're saying that it meets all of our requirements, but the reality is something different. You referenced the storage facility over on, I think that's Crystal Park Lane underneath the freeway. It's a different scenario, and that's why I'm comfortable with everything else related to this project, because I do see that project being very similar. But you don't have, or that existing use, but you don't have cars coming off Crystal Park at 65 miles an hour. And I'm just being overt about my comfort level with that finding. I'm not saying that the applicant can necessarily do anything about it. I'm just saying that we have a reality of a situation of where this project is proposed. It's sort of a contextual situation. It's like if you're putting a house in the middle of an earthquake fault. You could mitigate to the extent, but if there's a 7.0 earthquake, the thing's going to fall over.
I guess there's a lot of what ifs, and maybe we could call NHP and have them sit out there and monitor it.
Commissioners, additional comments? Discussion. Commissioner Marshall.
This one to me is a pretty close call, and I look at findings A, D, and E. And there's some compatibility issues that I have, and quite honestly, one of my major concerns is, do we need another box as we're coming into the city as a gateway issue? And I don't know if that's a compatibility concern or maybe site intensity and design under E. On the other hand, this is a CC zoning, and there's a whole lot of different uses that are contemplated in this, and so I find myself kind of balanced between reasonable expectations of uses of the property owner and yet a determination of what is compatible, particularly given the adjacent wells and the neighbors. I think the only information that we have in the record on speed of traffic indicates that it's substantially above the 35 miles an hour, and I understand, Commissioner Taylor, your points about it, that being the legal setting, but I think if we know that the actual reality is substantially different, that is a legitimate point to take and to determine whether or not the use has mitigated the potential traffic impacts. Now, that said, anything we put there is going to have the same any commercial is going to have cars, trucks, whatever, coming in and out on, accessing off of the frontage road there. So does that mean that we're saying that, there has to be, what's the solution? Is that they have to have significantly greater infrastructure to handle getting up to speed, or a right turn lane or left turn lane or something else? And is that something we can condition this project on? I don't know. It's an NDOT, to some degree an NDOT issue. So I'm not coming up with any great, thoughts on this one, but I see it as a close call and a difficult decision, because if we are not allowing this, what is a permissible use that we would come up with on, that we could make special use findings for? Thank you.
Commissioner Olivas, I'll follow on to that. And I think as far as condition D, when I look at that, I get the speeds, I get the reality of it. I think that it says mitigates, not eliminates. And I think that this is a low trip generator. There's a type 5 access to it, or lane, whatever. If some of these things don't get us over the hump to mitigate it, then we're saying nothing can go there. Those are some of the best mitigations, is low traffic and the lane for the speed. I get the reality of it too, with the real speeds coming off. That's a concern. But it's I don't know what else we could do other than say nothing goes there.
Additional comments? Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Several months ago, we looked at a project called Reno Gateway. And before that, we looked at it, and NDOT did a great job on that eastbound lane coming on the on-ramp there. And maybe they need to do something like this here before we come in front of the city council or us again, whatever the case might be. But looking at that ramp that gave that extra speed for the residents over there in Mogul, could be done right there at Gold Ranch as well for this project or any other project coming up in that area.
Mr. Taylor? Okay. It's an interesting one from my standpoint. The traffic discussion is one that is problematic just because a lot of it's outside of our control. and DOT, and I understand where we're going with that. I guess the one that I'm circling back on, some of the conversations that came up is it's not so much the use, it's the fact that the use is limited based on the lack of utilities that are out there. We as a city have a community commercial zone property across the street, I use that term loosely, from a casino. So some of the concerns about what is our intent coming into the city, I think we addressed that. I mean, the zoning is there, and we've got this original intent, whenever it was, to have this as potentially a commercial center. And I think there's some expectation, even in the description, from not only the applicant, but from some of the supportive public comments in the audience about this location being ideal, moving immediately up to the mountains. And so the idea that we're putting it onto a site that is devoid of both water and sewer has created a use that, in my mind, is a little bit problematic, just because, I understand that there's not always a dump station. I understand that there's not always a manager quarters, but I am a little concerned that there's no water on site for just a little bit of fill. There's no, restroom as a, point where you're first stopping off. So I think I'm looking at finding E, which normally, as you know, I get crosswise with scale and density and height. And in this case, I think we actually have something that's a decent height. But it's the uses proposed. And I think the use itself, I don't have a problem with. It's just that the way this is being presented without those utilities, it kind of ties in with finding C, where it talks about adequate services and infrastructure. There technically is adequate services for the property because they're not requesting any. But I have a problem with that, because I think the use that's being proposed, that is a problem. And I struggle with it, and I appreciate Commissioner Marshall saying this is one on the fence as well, because all of these findings are somewhat problematic, but I can make them. But the problem I have is that I'm making it for a project that I think has an inherent issue with what's being intended. So I'm struggling really with finding E because of the use proposed. I don't think actually achieves what they're trying to do. I think we're limited there because of that. And I know it's something that I'm still trying to struggle my way through, and if anybody else has any comments on it, but that's the one item that I'm just struggling with, is the fact that it's a utility-free situation that's being put into a place that's intended to be a quick on and off stop. And I think we're forcing people, I mean, the very discussion of using the facilities on the other side of the freeway, if you're coming down from one of the reservoirs, you would get off on this, go right past where your intended drop-off is, cross over to the west side of the freeway to dispose of, and dump and clean or wash, and then come back over and access the site from the north. And I think the intent is, for this location, that's not going to happen. So we're, relying, I know there's a lease requirement, there's some things saying what you can and you cannot do there, but it's not monitored. And honestly, to have the time it's going to take you to disconnect and, store and set up and walk away after you've spent, however many hours on the lake, to not have a restroom facility there, I see that as problematic. And I don't own a boat or an RV, but I have friends who do, and I've been with them. So that's the issue that I'm seeing with this. So I will throw it back if there's any other discussion.
Commissioner
Commissioner
Leaves, I'll
Leavis?
follow on to that, and this is a tough one, I agree, in the balance, but I hadn't considered this before, but if you do have that infrastructure there, and you do have water, and you do have sewer, and you do have some of those other things, then that's going to exacerbate the traffic. That's going to be far worse than it is with this low trip generator. So I struggle with that too, and what's the right balance between all this? And just kind of, not to debate that, but that's going to be the other reality if that infrastructure was there. This would be far more intensive coming off the freeway where it is.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Commissioner Olivas. And I tend to agree with that adding some more uses or amenities would increase some of the risks associated with this use. Also, I think there's a balance with the height and some of the other features, the low vehicle use, 14 trips, average daily trips a day, 18 feet. The allowed height in this area is 65 feet. So it's not, I understand the struggle, but it's not 100% perfect. It doesn't fit with everything, but there's considerations to be made. And this use, I think, is appropriate.
Well, if there's no additional discussion or comments, I would be looking to entertain a motion. Mr. Gower?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. In the case of LDC 20-00002 Verdi Boat and RV Storage, I would move to continue the item until we can get input from NDOT.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Gower. Looking for a second.
Commissioner Hawkins, second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for a continuance. I believe I need to double check with both legal and the applicant on that. Am I correct on that, Angela? I'll start with you.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that before you make the motion, you may want to ask the applicant to come up and see if he agrees with the continuance, or if he does not, then he'll ask you to make a decision another direction.
Okay, I can appreciate that. So I'll ask the applicant's representative. There's a motion or a discussion from this body to continue this until we can receive some more information from NDOT. And maybe I can bring it back, Commissioner Gower, and ask if there's something specific that we're looking for from NDOT on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for asking. So the specific information that I would be looking for is their anticipated or potential measures that could be employed to mitigate some of the traffic concerns that could be involved in this project, because we are looking to mitigate, not completely eliminate, as was mentioned, but it is their right of way. So I would like to hear if they have plans or strategies or additional data that could supplement, refute, or confirm some of the information that we've received relative to the traffic speeds and how those might weigh into the specific movements and concerns regarding those movements into and out of the property. To make finding D.
Okay. And Angela, is that a sufficient, something that staff, depending on the outcome of both the motion and the applicant's discussion about this, are you able to get NDOT to at least come here and provide that information as a part of this?
I think that is the million-dollar question, Chairman Johnson. We will do our best to have them here. That's the best I can say.
Okay.
Yep.
So, Dave, just to point out, we have a motion and a second. I have not taken a vote. I have not weighed in on this, but I think you've heard a lot of concerns about traffic. Is this, how would the applicant feel moving forward if this proposed motion is taken and passed on?
Yes,
and
continuance or no
there-
continuance? Putting John on the spot. Come up to the
Yeah.
mic.
Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Say who you are.
John Stever for the Record Creation Funding. I mean, ideally, we would have some sort of decision tonight. We've requested NDOT be here. They had a scheduling conflict. We've got the reports. We've worked with the engineers. This isn't a final permit approval. This is an approval of a special use permit. After the permit's approved, then it's obviously working with the engineers. It's working with the city. It's working with the neighbors. So, I mean, your choice. I just, what would the, what does the NDOT timeline look like?
Angela Foose, Planning Manager for the record. We continue to ask NDOT to show up at these meetings, and we usually get a yes until the day before, and then they have to cancel for scheduling conflicts. So at this point, they have told us that they will be at the February 5th Planning Commission meeting. Mind you, I think we have 8 other projects that night, and one of them is a very long project. So I think you have a couple options. You can agree to the continuance. We can put it on the February 5th agenda, or we can move it to another agenda night, another night where maybe we don't have such a busy agenda. That is, again, kind of up for discussion, but an option if you do want to have NDOT participate in these discussions is to continue it, and we will make sure that they show up at that meeting whenever it's rescheduled.
Mr. Chairman, Angela, the other option is that if they can't make a meeting for a project on their own right-of-way, that they could provide a letter, something a little bit more detailed that addresses the concerns and, you know, potential mitigation or design changes that they're anticipating.
And we can do that. We can pass along the feedback from tonight and the questions that we heard from the commission tonight and have them put something in writing.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Yeah, so the next, okay.
Commissioner Gower, what specifically information are you looking for of NDOT on this?
I mean, I thought I outlined it earlier, so I'd be looking for information relative to if they have data to supplement, refute, or confirm some of the traffic speeds that are recorded off of that on-ramp, number one. I'd be interested in knowing that relative to the stopping distances. I'd be interested in knowing if they have additional mitigation options that could be included as part of the project design. And 3, if they're contemplating any sort of improvements to that frontage road in the future that would essentially eliminate any concerns that I might have. It's on their frontage, Commissioner Taylor, and they're not here to answer any of these questions. So how can we, in good faith, respond to a condition that relates to traffic for an NDOT right-of-way when they're not here?
Brooke Oswald, Associate Planner for the record. I did speak with Tara last night prior to her canceling. I had a phone call with her. To what you are suggesting, I did request a letter to address some of those similar concerns that you have. She said she would write a letter. That letter was passed on to you. As noted, that letter was very minimal in its content and did not address the concerns that I asked to be addressed. So just bear in mind that those were asked, and that is what was received from NDOT on that.
And I just want to make clear, I'm not faulting city staff in any way. I think that the information that was provided was the best that we could do. In good faith, as a commissioner, I'm seeing a concern relative to a finding, and I think there's additional information that could be obtained from a relevant agency that may have information that could help me make the findings, and that agency representative is not here tonight to answer those questions, and that's why I'm asking for a continuance.
I agree.
So I have a motion. I still haven't gotten a discussion as to whether there's an agreement on that.
So I hear the NDOT concerns. I appreciate that. Obviously, it is on their frontage road. It's a shame they couldn't be here, but in my opinion, we either vote yes or no, and have, if it's a yes vote, condition on NDOT approval. That way, we don't have to kind of keep kicking the can down the road. I don't know if that's an option.
Angela, I was going to ask this question about this too. What is there is a requirement for an NDOT permit, which I think is separate than a finding that Commissioner Gower is asking for, but NDOT is required to basically review and permit this project during final design.
That's correct. And they do not review preliminary at a tentative or special use permit level. They don't review plans at that level. They have to wait till final design when the final project comes in, but that is a requirement. They will have to review. The plans will have to be approved, will have to meet their standards, and they will have to mitigate any impacts that they're concerned with. The client will have to, or the applicant will have to address those concerns in order to get NDOT's approval.
Chair, the letter from NDOT that we had dated December 17th identifies the proposed gate location had to be moved back to make sure we didn't stack in the right-of-way, but also additional signage and pavement markings. That's something that's to be worked out. That was one that was identified specific to this project. So if there's signage for slowing down, it could be in terms of flashing. One of the things I've thought about that might be helpful, not only this project, but the people who access off of Orange Post Road, people are going quite fast, is rumble strips. I think they use
Dave,
them.
let's not speculate.
Oh,
at this point.
I understand.
The-
I understand.
The question that's on the table is the applicant interested, under the understanding, and we'll discuss it at our level, is the applicant willing to accept a continuance or not, so that I can determine whether I'm going to move forward with that, or we're going to be looking at it as a straight yes or no vote?
Do you want to have a yes or no, or do you want to continue it?
I would say yes or no.
The applicant would like to get a yes or no decision tonight.
Okay, so Angela, back to your comment about asking the applicant whether an extension is acceptable. I'm hearing no. So with that, I would say, Commissioner Gower, that finding that you are struggling with, you will have to be looking at the pros and cons, or that your ability to make that finding, what I'm hearing is going to be based on the information that's been provided to us up to this point.
Excuse me, Chair Johnson, Carl Hall, City Attorney's Office. I just wanted to make the commission aware that in reviewing our code, the Planning Commission on a special use permit has 30 days from the date of the hearing to make a decision. So, there is some time there. I don't know if this can get on an agenda within that 30 days, but I just wanted to let the council or the commission know that that's what our code provides. So, the Planning Commission shall hold a public hearing within 65 days of the application. The Planning Commission shall make a decision within 30 days from the date of the hearing. So just for additional information on your consideration of that issue.
I appreciate that, Mr. Hall. Under that scenario, that does require a full meeting of the commission. And would that be, I have not done that before, but would that require an updated presentation, or does it just get opened for a vote? Or are we getting into legal ground?
Typically, when we've continued items like this before that have been noticed, then we would continue it to a time certain so that everybody that's here knows when the next hearing is, if you were requesting additional information. But then the other question is whether or not we can get it on the agenda. And that is something that I don't know whether or not we have capacity in our agendas in the near future within the next 30 days to put it on the agenda. And if that's not something that Angela can answer, then perhaps you got to make a decision tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
I was just looking, I was counting the dates on the calendar. I believe you are, in terms of noticing, I think you can make the February 5th meeting. Again, that is a completely full stacked meeting that you may not even get to the end of the agenda before 11 p.m. with what's on the agenda now. So keep that in mind.
Okay, I'm not sure I have my answer yet. So I've heard from the applicant that they are not interested in a continuance. However, per legal, we have the ability at our level to essentially continue it because we're not required to make a decision for 30 days from the point of this hearing. That this hearing, it's not, this is the 30-day.
From the date of the hearing, that's today.
Thank you. Commissioner Marshall? Yeah, we're getting into legal stuff, please.
Mr. City Attorney, does that mean that, and I think somebody asked this already, does the hearing have to close in order for us to use that 30-day extension? So can we take additional testimony from NDOT during that 30 days? Or is that just for a decision, or can we continue the hearing and so we can get the NDOT person to come and give testimony?
And
But
maybe
that's
I
the
should
purpose.
interrupt. Maybe another option is that we, if you choose to continue this, we put it on the February 5th agenda, and we put this on the item, the first item on the agenda. So that would mean it would for sure get heard. NDOT has told us they will be there at that meeting because there's other projects that they have agreed to be there for. So that is also an option. That way you're guaranteed that they can meet the 30-day timeline.
Right, but what I want to make certain is that we have the legal ability to hear that testimony at that time. If what the statute says is from 30 days from the close of hearing, does that preclude us from getting that testimony? The whole reason why we want the continuance.
Well, that's the question, right? We haven't concluded the hearing yet. If we're continuing it, I'm assuming that the hearing is ongoing and that it's going to be reopened, so to speak, in February.
And we don't need the applicant's permission to do that. Is that what your opinion is?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Gower, I'm going to throw this one back to you. You've heard the conversation about that you were the one who's put the motion together for the continuance. Our city attorney has indicated that we have the right to do that, provided that the date certain rehearing it is on February 5th. So we haven't had any discussion about the motion, so I'll throw it back to you to determine whether you want to continue with that, and then I'll ask the seconder if that's the case as well.
Mr. Chairman, from my perspective, I think it would benefit the record to get the information from NDOT. My other motion would be to not to recommend denial of the special use permit based on my inability to meet finding D, because I don't have the information to make that finding from NDOT. The process will take care of itself. If that motion passes, it gets appealed to city council. My hope is that the information is available to city council from NDOT. But I don't know if that benefits the process any. The planning commission is here to make a recommendation to city council based on the best information that's available, and I feel like there's some additional information that would be available to make an informed decision. And frankly, that's all I'm asking for. So I would, I understand the applicant's situation. You just want to get a decision from us, so you either know that you get your SUP moving forward, or you have to appeal it to city council. I understand that. I'm sitting here, I'm trying to get some information to make a decision. So based on that, my decision is the same, Mr. Chairman, and my motion is that I would like this commission to get the information that it needs to make an informed decision relative to finding D. And that's why I made that motion in the first place.
Okay, so I have a motion for continuance, and I'm going to assume that's date certain.
Date
February
certain for
5th.
February 5th.
Per the legal requirements established.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I have a motion for continuance. Looking for a second.
Commissioner Hawkins, second again.
I have a motion and a second. Looking for discussion on the motion before us. Commissioner Olivas?
Commissioner Olivas, I wouldn't support a continuance. I think applicant doesn't want one. I don't know that we'll necessarily get cooperation from NDOT. We haven't so far. Sounds like they got a history of not. Even if they're there, it does not mean that they're going to provide that information. To Commissioner Gower's point, if this gets denied and gets appealed, then there's the opportunity for city council to have that same information if NDOT's going to be cooperative. So that's one of the difficulties of dealing with other agencies, and that's part of the reality that we live in. Talking about the realities of the speed, that's one of the other realities that we're dealing with here too. So I would not support a motion to continue, and I'd prefer to get an answer tonight and let it play out.
Thank you, Commissioner Olivas. Any additional comments? I have a motion for continuance. All those in favor?
Just for clarification, is that motion for a continuance to a date certain?
It is. That was the question that I asked for. It would be a date certain to February 5th.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so motion for the continuance fails. 2 votes for, Commissioner Gower, Commissioner Hawkins, 4 votes against, Commissioner Olivas, Commissioner Marshall, Commissioner Taylor, and Commissioner Johnson. Okay, so I'm looking for an additional motion now, or I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Taylor.
Commissioner Taylor, in the matter of case number LDC 20000002, Verdi Boat and RV Storage, I think I got all the zeros. Based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the special use permit subject to conditions, and I can make all of the findings.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Taylor. Looking for-
Does that condition or that motion also include staff's proposed addition of condition number 11?
Yes, I'm sorry, including condition 11. Thank you.
That was, just for clarification, that was the condition to require that signage on the project be in conformance with the neighborhood commercial zone in lieu of the CC zoning. Got that right? I got that right. Okay. Okay, I have a motion. Looking for
Commissioner
a second.
Olivas, I'll second, and I can make all the findings.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I saw you hitting the button, but I didn't know which it was for. Commissioner Marshall.
Thank you. I'll be voting no on the motion because I can't make finding A, compatibility, particularly the 24 hours operation, plus the nearness to the well. I can't make finding D regarding mitigating traffic impacts, and I can't make finding E because of the site intensity for the reasons that were discussed by our chair, as well as site design for the freeway, the entranceway into the city of Reno. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so motion fails. 2 votes for, Commissioner Olivas and Commissioner Taylor. 4 votes against, Commissioner Marshall, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Hawkins, and Commissioner Gower. So with that, we don't have to do any, the motion failed, correct? Okay. So based on that, I will read the appeal process in. Any final action, not including recommendations or failure to take action by the Planning Commission, may be appealed to the Reno City Council by the applicant, the mayor, or a city council member, or any person who is aggrieved by the action or inaction. An appeal, together with fees, must be filed with the city clerk within 10 calendar days, starting on the day after written notice of the action is filed with the city clerk. And if the 10th calendar day falls on a weekend or a holiday when the clerk's office is not open, the appeal may be filed on the next business day. Okay. Thank you, and I will move on. We have a couple more items on the agenda, so I'll ask that any conversations occur outside the chambers so we can finish up with our meeting. Thank you very much. And with that, the first thing I will do is apologize to my commission for not taking a break between public comment and discussion. And second to that, I will now say item 7, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report.
Mr. Chairman, we had a schools subcommittee meeting today with our.
Again, pardon me, Commissioner Gower.
Yeah.
Again, any outside of, please take everything outside of the chambers so that we can finish our meeting. Thank you very much. Sorry, Commissioner Gower.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a schools, Regional Planning Commission, Regional Planning Governing Board Subcommittee meeting today to consider ways to approach school sites, whether they be projects of regional significance or require identification on a regional plan map or some other mechanism for mitigating or addressing potential concerns regarding school sites at the regional level. There's that, and then we have our regional planning regular meeting next week, and I believe that there are several items related to City of Reno that we'll be seeing on that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Item 8, staff announcements.
Well, since it's been less than a week since our last meeting, I do not have any updates from council. We do have another planning commission meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, so that will be out of our ordinary schedule. We don't really ever meet on Tuesdays, so be prepared. That will be to go over the zoning code update. I anticipate a good meeting, a lot of discussion, so come hungry, we'll feed you, and hopefully had some good discussion.
Just for clarification, is that going to be in chambers or caucus room?
It is in chambers.
At 5.
At 5.
Chambers at 5, okay. Thank you. Item 9, Commissioner suggestions for future agenda items. Seeing none. Item 10, public comment. Michelle, do we have any requests to speak forms on this item? Anyone
No, I do not.
anyone wishing to make public comment on this item? Anybody wearing checkered Vans wishing to make public comment on this item? Okay, I'll close public comment and bring it back to item 11, adjournment. All those in favor?
Good night.
Good night.